We are now in public session. Announcements of EU scrutiny decisions. Schedule A proposals. It was agreed that COM 2018-693 and COM 2018-694 warrant further scrutiny. It was also agreed to request a detailed note on the IPAs with both Singapore and Vietnam and how they relate to the similar CETA proposals, and to request the Department to indicate when it is anticipated the CETA and the Vietnam and Singapore IPAs will be brought to the Oireachtas for ratification. It was agreed that COM 2018-691 and COM 2018-692 do not warrant further scrutiny. It was agreed that the following Schedule B proposals do not warrant further scrutiny. COM 151-57, 157-3, 162-11, 243-08, 2508, 253-30, 2849, 402-6, 113-4, 211-5, 279-17, 79-31, 92-4, C310-4, C310-5, C315-22. Is that agreed? Thank you. We will now suspend for a moment to allow our guests to take their seats. Can I remind members, visitors and those in the public gallery to please ensure their mobile phones are switched off or in flight mode for the duration of this meeting, as they interfere with broadcasting equipment even when on silent mode. I would like to welcome from the Expert Group on Future Skill Needs, Mr Tony Donoghue, Chair of the Expert Group on Future Skill Needs, Mr Kevin Daly, Principal Officer. From the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, Ms Claire Dunn, Assistant Secretary, Workplace Regulation and Economic Migration, Mr Rob Walsh, Assistant Principal, Employment Permit Section. From Solace, Ms Mary Liz Trant, Executive Director for Skills Development, and Mr Andrew Brownlee, Executive Director for Strategy and Knowledge. You're all very welcome. In accordance with procedure, I am required to read out the following. By virtue of Section 17(2)(l) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to this committee. If you are directed by the Committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and you continue to so do, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I would remind our guests that the presentation should be no more than 5 minutes duration. Members have been circulated with the presentations submitted already. I now ask Mr Donoghue to make the presentation to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to address you on the issue of Ireland's skills needs, and in particular the role of the expert group on future skills needs, which I have the privilege to chair. I'm accompanied, as you said, by Kevin Daly, who heads up the group's secretariat. The expert group on future skills needs was established in 1997 as an independent body which advises the government on the current and future skill needs of the Irish economy. Its membership consists of Ireland's main skills policy stakeholders: the Department of Education and Skills, the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, the Higher Education Authority, Lawless, Enterprise Ireland, IDA Ireland, IBEC and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. The group carries out research, analysis and horizon scanning in relation to emerging skills requirements at both thematic and sector levels. The work is always based on extensive engagement and consultation with the enterprise sector, as well as an examination of relevant domestic and international trends. On foot of this research, the group makes recommendations on how these skills needs can be addressed. Recent reports have included studies on sectors as diverse as food and drink, biopharma, hospitality, marine and freight transport, distribution and logistics. The group has made a number of recommendations relating to the establishment or support for new apprenticeships, as well as the attraction of international talent, including through the employment permit system. Its recent reports have highlighted apprenticeships and employment permits as key interventions in addressing the skills needs of the Irish economy. Since 2017, the group has been part of the broader national skills architecture established as part of the government's National Skills Strategy 2025, along with the Skills and Labour Market Research Unit in Lawless and a network of regional skills fora. The group's work is overseen, considered and approved by the National Skills Council, which advises on the prioritisation of identified skills needs and the allocation of resources across the education and training system. This council is chaired by the Minister for Education and Skills. The new skills architecture reflects the responsive and flexible skills infrastructure that has been developing in Ireland over recent years. This responsiveness and flexibility will be key to addressing the skills challenges in Ireland in the future. These include the labour supply implications of the economy reaching full employment, the UK's departure from the European Union and other international uncertainties, which will require greater agility amongst workers and enterprises engaging with international markets, and the impact of rapid and continuous technological change on jobs, business models and sectors. The EGFSN's work programme for 2017 and 2018 has sought to reflect and advise on the government's response to these challenges. We have published studies on design thinking and skills, which will facilitate firms in being innovative and competitive in global markets, and on the trade-related skills needs arising from Brexit, such as customs clearance, logistics and supply chain management, as well as international business development, financial management, foreign languages and cultural awareness. These studies seek to support the trade diversification agenda, which has been given further impetus by the implications of Brexit. The group will also publish 2 5-year forecast studies For the demand for high-level ICT skill sets across the economy to 2022, a key input into the developments of the new ICT Skills Action Plan, which is due for publication in the coming weeks, and for the impact of digitalisation on job roles and sectors across the economy in the years to 2023. Our ability to service our high-level ICT skills needs will determine the continued growth and competitiveness of the Irish economy by supporting our ability to exploit these technologies that are transforming the world of work internationally and leading to digitalisation across all sectors of the economy. By identifying the impact of these high-level ICT functions on Ireland's workforce, the Group has also set out to facilitate the education and training sector in targeting its supporting measure for these workers and sectors most at risk from automation, and so help them to prepare for the future world of work. Through its evidence-based research and findings, the Expert Group on Future Skills Needs therefore seeks to support the national skills agenda and wider economic and enterprise growth by ensuring the emerging skills needs of enterprise can be identified and their provision fully anticipated and met by education and training providers. I welcome any questions on the Group's work, and I'd like to thank you again, Chair, and the committee for the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Donoghue. We'll now hear from Ms Claire Dunn, please.
Thank you, Kelleher. I too would like to thank the committee for your invitation this afternoon. Skills policy is primarily the responsibility of the Department of Education and Skills. The Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, however, works closely with colleagues in that department, as well as with other stakeholders from across government, industry and the education and training system, to ensure that the pool of talent within Ireland is fully aligned with the skill needs of enterprise. As our recent enterprise policy framework, Enterprise 2025 Renewed, states, our ability to develop, nurture, retain and attract talent has never been more critical than it is in today's dramatically changing world. The Department's enterprise agencies, as well as the network of local enterprise offices, are represented on the 9 regional skills fora, providing a vital link between regional enterprises and local education and training providers. The Department and its agencies inform and support the implementation of a number of key skills strategies led by the Department of Education and Skills, including those for STEM, ICT skills, foreign languages and apprenticeships and traineeships. The Department Secretary-General, as well as the Chief Executives of Enterprise Ireland, IDA Ireland and Science Foundation Ireland, are members of the National Skills Council, whose function is to advise on the prioritisation of identified skills needs while working to enhance education and training provider responses to and delivery of these identified needs. Ireland operates a managed employment permit system, which seeks to maximise the benefits of economic migration while minimising the risk of disrupting Ireland's labour market. The system is intended to act as a conduit for key skills which are required to develop enterprise in the state for the benefit of our economy, while simultaneously protecting the balance of the labour market. It is designed to supplement Ireland's skills and labour supply over the short to medium term by allowing enterprise to recruit nationals from outside of the European Economic Area, where such skills or expertise cannot be readily sourced from within domestic or EEA labour markets. The system is vacancy-led and driven by the changing needs of the labour market and is managed by way of a list system. There are 2 lists, namely the highly skilled occupation list for in-demand occupations and the ineligible occupation list for which a ready source of labour should be available. As demand grows or recedes, adjustments are made through changes to these lists following a twice-yearly evidence-based review. The review process involves the examination of labour market intelligence outlined in the National Skills Bulletin, the Vacancy Overview Report, research undertaken by the Expert Group on Future Skills Needs, input from relevant government departments, and with a public consultation with stakeholders, including industry. EU-level analysis shows that Ireland is ahead of most EU member states in terms of linking market intelligence to labour migration policy. The employment permit system is not focused on any particular country or region, and almost all non-EEA nationals can apply for an employment permit if they satisfy the conditions. The system forms part of the response to address skills deficits, but it is not intended over the longer term to act as a substitute for meeting the challenge of upskilling our resident workforce. Economic migration alone is not a long-term solution to skills and labour shortages. The development of particular skills in the resident labour force depends upon a judicious deployment of economic migration as a supplementary rather than a permanent source of those skills, and any adjustment to the system must be made with this in mind. In recent years, the state's economic migration policy has been focused on attracting highly skilled workers who can drive the development of the productive economy. While this was the appropriate approach during the downturn and the start of the recovery, now, as we approach almost full employment, difficulties are emerging in some lower skilled occupations in certain sectors. A review of our economic migration policy was published in September, and that review found that the existing system has served the state well in recent years by allowing us to focus on attracting skills critical to business, even in the context of a significant labour market surplus. Now, with the strong employment growth that is being experienced across all sectors, pressures are emerging in occupations the system has not previously needed to address. Therefore, an adjusted approach is needed, one which will, on the one hand, continue to ensure that Ireland can attract highly skilled foreign workers, while on the other hand, allows the system to respond to verified labour shortages that arise from time to time in lower skilled occupations. Key recommendations in the report include changes to the twice-yearly review of the occupation list to make the system even more responsive in real time, and the introduction of a seasonal employment permit, which we currently don't have. As the economy improves and we approach full employment, my department has experienced a very high volume of employment permit applications in recent months, with the numbers received almost 30% higher than in 2017. And just to point out, 2017 was higher than 2016. In fact, in October 2018, Employment Permits section issued more permits in that month than during any other month in the past 10 years. This increase, combined with the introduction of employment permit quotas for chefs and certain agricultural workers, has led to some delays in processing applications. The Department has introduced measures to reduce the current waiting times, which are now down to 5 weeks for trusted applications, or applications from trusted partners. These are people who are regular users of the service, and 12 weeks for standard applications. This, in fact, will soon be 11 weeks, I'm told. As of tomorrow, it will be 11 weeks. We expect that these improvements will continue until we return to our target processing times of what was 2 weeks for trusted partner applications and 4 for standard. An efficient and responsive employment permit system is viewed by my department and by the government more widely as a critical lever in addressing the economy's skills needs and ensuring that talent is attracted to Ireland from non-EEA sources. I can assure you of my department's determination to ensure that the employment permit system is as agile as possible and responsive as possible to support the needs of the labour market and the economy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Dunn. And now we'll hear from Mr Brownlee, please.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Solace, I would like to thank the Joint Committee for the opportunity today to discuss Ireland's skills needs and in particular the role of Solace in this important matter. Solace mandate, as set out in primary legislation, the Further Education and Training Act 2013, is to fund, coordinate and monitor a range of further education and training provision to ensure economic and social well-being and to play our part in progressing, influencing and supporting the development of a FET sector that is increasingly responsive to the needs of learners and employers. Solace has a range of responsibilities which includes, but is not limited to, funding of the further education and training sector, implementing the further education and training strategy, overseeing the implementation of strategic performance agreements which have been signed between Solace and each education and training board which sets out plans over the next 3 years, statutory responsibility for the apprenticeship system, carrying out analysis of the labour market and promoting the standing of further education and training. Central to these responsibilities is a key overarching objective that further education and training provision is underpinned by a clear labour market rationale to ensure that learners are being provided with key skills aligned with an evidence-based skills need. Such an approach maximises the potential for the learner to move into employment following their studies and, in tandem, addresses a skills gap for employers. For those in employment, access to lifelong learning will ensure skills remain relevant to meet future technological changes in the workplace due to the impact of automation and digitalisation. In relation to the discussion today on Ireland's skills needs, it is worth referencing the Skills and Labour Market Research Unit, the SLMRU, which is a team of economists and labour market researchers within Lawless. The SLMRU undertakes research and analysis of the labour market and publishes data which facilitates policy development on skills needs across government. For example, the output of the SLMRU feeds into the work of both the National Skills Council and the Expert Group on Future Skills Needs. Each year, Lawless and the National Skills Council publish the National Skills Bulletin, which provides up-to-date information on labour market needs, which in turn assists policymakers in determining strategic approaches to address skills gaps across all sectors of the economy. The SLMRU also undertakes analysis at a regional level, which supports the objectives of regional skills fora who work with educators and employers to address regional skills needs. As part of the strategic performance agreements, the education and training boards take account of this regional labour market analysis in their planning. More generally, the work of the SLMRU can inform and assist learners, parents and guidance professionals in making choices in terms of future education and employment. We understand that the committee is particularly interested in the role of apprenticeship in addressing skills needs, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Mary-Liz Trant, to provide some opening remarks in that regard.
Kelleher and committee members, thank you. Lawless has been closely involved over the past 4 years in the national policy to expand apprenticeship, supporting the Department of Education and Skills and working closely with education and training boards, higher education institutions, the HEA, QQI, the enterprise community, apprentices and trainees. The expansion of apprenticeship is a key priority for government, drawing on a strong track record, evidence that apprenticeship is an effective way of meeting skills needs and building the pipeline of talent within industry, and a vision of its potential to become a major route to skills development in this country. Following an independent review of the apprenticeship system in 2013, the then Minister for Education and Skills appointed an apprenticeship council to steer expansion of apprenticeships into new areas of industry and leading to awards from level 5 to level 10 on the National Framework of Qualifications. The programme for government and the action plan for education contain a commitment to having a cumulative 31,000 enrolments on apprenticeship programmes between 2016 and 2020, which represents more than a doubling of activity over the period. Details of how this overall target would be reached through increased enrolments each year are set out in the action plan to expand apprenticeship and traineeship 2016 to 2020, along with information on supporting initiatives. The remit of the Apprenticeship Council is to oversee the development of a range of new apprenticeships, initially through a call for proposals, and to examine the issues associated with creating a more flexible and accessible model of apprenticeship that would meet the needs of a diverse range of employers. Alongside this work, the curricula of existing craft apprenticeships are being remodelled to keep pace with new methods and technologies in the workplace and ensure that apprentices have the broader range of literacy, numeracy, ICT and teamworking skills they need to be successful. As of this month, November 2018, the number of national apprenticeship programmes has increased to 42, up from 27 in 2016. A further 35 programmes are in the pipeline. The new apprenticeships are developed and overseen by industry-led consortia and are based on identification of skills needs. Over 500 employers are now hiring apprentices on the new programmes, including many in the tech, finance, biopharma, medtech, logistics and hospitality and tourism industries, companies who are using apprenticeship for the first time as a talent pipeline for their business. Craft apprenticeships are growing strongly, with industry re-engaging with apprenticeship recruitment, and apprentice registrations have now more than doubled since the end of 2013, going from 1,929 to over 4,500 as of the end of October 2018. Registrations on craft apprenticeships are exceeding forecasts, and while registrations on the 17 newer programmes have been lower than originally envisaged, these are rising as the programmes become more established. We are now in a new phase of development of apprenticeship in Ireland. All of the key building blocks are in place and there is an excellent base of new programmes. The focus is now on employers and learners. Through the Apprenticeship Council and other partners, we are working hard with employers to ensure that they fully exploit these new opportunities to develop the talent in their workforce. It is only through real partnership and employer support that these important pathways into employment for the first time or to career advancement can be opened up. The Apprenticeship Council has begun engaging in recent months with industry representatives in the consortia to discuss progress, how the apprenticeships are meeting skills needs, employer support for the new programmes, and their ambition regarding targets for each apprenticeship to 2020. Work is also underway to address the visibility of apprenticeship opportunities, to promote these pathways to women and other underrepresented groups, and to engage with the career guidance community. The Generation Apprenticeship campaign is in full swing, and the campaign has a lot to promote. Last month, the first graduates from new apprenticeship programmes emerged. Hundreds of craft apprentices received their qualifications, and I know you're going to be speaking to some apprentices later. A review of pathways to apprenticeship was published, and a number of new programmes were launched. In conclusion, we ask the committee to note the key role of Solace in meeting Ireland's skills needs, both in terms of apprenticeship and labour market focused provision nationwide that provides work-ready graduates with up-to-date skills, and by publishing reports that analyse the labour market and identify our current and future skills needs. A soon-to-be-published survey of employers across the country shows the high regard in which employers hold our further and higher education graduates. There is a lot of positive feedback on the contribution of an expanded apprenticeship system in meeting skills needs and on its potential in the future. With 17 new apprenticeship programmes available and 35 more in the pipeline, a key success factor over the coming years will be to secure large-scale buy-in by employers to the new and expanded apprenticeship offerings, particularly in industry areas where apprenticeship has not been a traditional part of the skills pipeline. In addition to our opening statement, we have provided the committee members with 3 tables on registrations over the last 4 years, the number of participating employers on new programmes, and those new programmes which are due to roll out over the coming months. We look forward to discussing with committee members the progress made and the opportunities and challenges to come.
Thank you very much, Ms Trant, and thank you for the comprehensive document supporting it. It's very helpful. We'll now start with questions. Deputy Kelleher.
Yeah, just very briefly, and thanks very much for coming in and just outlining your positions on some of the issues. Just a few apologies for being late, but I was just trying to locate a particular document at the time. Just very briefly, when we talk about skills, Mr. Paul Healy, of the CEO of Skillnet, recently stated that Ireland runs the risk of becoming a two-speed economy. He then goes on to say that, Mr. Healy, there are reasons why SME owners don't engage in training for themselves and their employees. The distraction factor is probably the key one. Business owners are focused on other priorities, filling the next order, making the next sale, and basic business survival. Skillnet Ireland commissioned Amora to carry out research. In that research area, a number of reasons were given for the lack of engagement and training. Number one was awareness. They didn't think there was a need for training. And the next reason was cost. They said they couldn't afford the cost. And I suppose the reason I'm asking that in the context of the basic skills of any economy, you speak about the need for apprenticeships, we speak about the need for work permits and to allow people into the country where there's a skill shortage. But I'm just beginning to wonder, are we focused enough on basically training the workforce that's already within the state itself, and what efforts are being made to encourage that continual yearning for self-advancement and training, and whether or not there's obstacles, and whether or not as policymakers we could be collectively doing things that could encourage particularly the small and medium-sized sector to better engage with SkillsNet and other training programmes to advance the standards of their workforce. So that will be one issue. Just in terms of when we talk about, particularly to Ms. Claire Dunn, just in terms of the High Court or the Supreme Court's case in May of 2017, it struck down the absolute ban of asylum seekers from working as being unconstitutional and has forced the government to finally address the need to reform of direct provision system. And I suppose within that, there are several thousand people who are in direct provision. It is now deemed to be unconstitutional, even though the government did bring forward proposals to address some of that. But I'm wondering, have we looked at the makeup of people in direct provision? Have we looked at the opportunities that we should afford to them, and equally the opportunities they may afford to us, in terms of allowing them not only to work but also to avail of training programmes, particularly in areas where they may have competencies that we are short in. And I'm just wondering, has there been any assessment of the skills sets that are within those, or with those people that are in these reception centres, which quite frankly I abhor in the first place, but that's for another forum at another time. But in terms of just training them and allowing them to partake in the workforce, what efforts have been made to assess that skills base? Just on the broader issue then of apprenticeships itself, and we talk about the economy and the need to ensure that we're responsive to the needs of the economy out there. And then I look at the EGFSN is an independent body made up of representatives from the Department of Education and Skills, Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, the Higher Education Authority, Solus Enterprise Ireland IDA and IBEC and the ICTU. I'm just inquiring about resourcing available to that, and then the resourcing made available to implement its recommendations and its observations, and whether or not there are sufficient resources in view of the fact that economies, particularly open global economies like our own, that are very much dependent on the trends internationally, needs to respond very quickly. And any lag time in terms of assessing the future skill needs of an economy could have a detrimental impact on an economy like ours, which, as I said, must be responsible, must be agile, and must be able to respond to the basic challenges out there. And very finally, we talk about Brexit proofing. And the fact that I've asked this on a few occasions, I'm still not satisfied, not with you, by the way, but to other entities and other organisations, the fact that we will have a free movement arrangement with that's long-standing, actually long-standing with the UK. So post-Brexit, regardless of whether it is deal or no deal, we will be in a common travel area with the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which means that the people in the Republic can go to the UK, work and reside, and vice versa. Now, if that is the case, has there been any assessment done that in the event of a large labour pool from Europe being cut off to the UK, that they would be there drawing from now on out of this labour pool? And very quickly, we could have huge challenges in terms of our competitiveness and our labour costs, because we would have a very big economy who effectively would have cut off quite a substantial labour pool to itself from the European Union, except for the Republic of Ireland, which will have a common travel area agreement with the United Kingdom. And bearing in mind, I don't know how many people are working from the UK or from Europe in the UK at the moment, but we can assume that there's a substantial number of people. And that in itself may not continue post-Brexit. And if that is the case, could we be under pressure ourselves, because we would be basically competing with the UK, who have then cut off the European Union as labour as an opportunity? So it's just an observation, and whether or not there's been any assessment done if that is the potential. And I particularly note the areas of engineering, medicine and other key areas where we have huge skill shortages at the present time, and percolating right down to the whole area of construction. Thank you.
Kelleher, quite a lot there. Who'd like to start? Mr. Brownie, do you want to take the first question? Yeah, or Ms. Trant, yeah.
So thank you for the comments and the queries. So just, I suppose, on the issue of I suppose the extent to which employers are engaging, in training of their own workforce. I mean, I suppose that plan to expand apprenticeship and traineeship, for that matter, sort of set out the ambition, the collective ambition between education and training, and then the industry, I suppose, to really build a very strong partnership of developing our workforce workforce. Apprenticeship being, where somebody is taken on hard by an employer is absolutely at the heart of that policy. We have ambitious targets to 2020. We want to have that cumulative figure of 31,000 apprentices, and we want to have over 70 apprenticeship programmes. Achieving that will mean a huge step forward, we believe, in that partnership and in that commitment and engagement in developing the workforce in Ireland. The feedback we've got from employers who are now engaging in new programmes is really strong. I mean, where they are recognising the potential, and these are employers for whom apprenticeship is a whole new concept. They've never used apprenticeship before. The tech sector, the finance sector being examples of that, where it's always, for example, been primarily the graduate pool coming through, and they're seeing that opportunity of taking on apprentices and developing them, retaining them, and moulding them as they go, and how powerful that is as a way of developing the workforce. So, I mean, I suppose we're in a very, we believe that this actually has got huge potential. We're gathering the Apprenticeship Council is gathering feedback from employers on how it's going. Taking on board a range of feedback. We're looking at things like how affordable, the cost, there's a big contribution by the state to apprenticeship, for example, and how employers then make their contribution also. I'd like to mention traineeship, which isn't a direct feature of today, but it's another part, I suppose, of that employer education partnership. And we've got targets to 2020 on traineeship as well. Within education and training boards, in the last year alone, 50 new traineeships have been introduced, which is almost 50 around the country. Traineeships are shorter courses, built very much based on demand from employers, and particularly locally and regionally. And there's been a very strong response. The ETBs have told us that there's been a really positive engagement by local and regional employers in developing these traineeships to actually meet the needs of the workforce. I'd also just like to mention a new policy called Skills to Advance, which is where there's supporting low-skilled workers to upskill in work. That policy was just launched earlier this year, and working with the education and training boards, we're implementing that now. So, and the government has provided 11 million for 2019 to support that. So again, I suppose it's another plank of that. I suppose a big shift and a big, into where we've got an approach now where there is that very strong partnership between education and enterprise to invest in the workforce and to support the workforce on an ongoing basis, particularly when there are shortages of personnel. So I might just stop there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ms Dunn, do you want to take the question in relation to direct provision?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, my department worked very closely with the Department of Justice and Equality in developing a response to the Supreme Court judgment some months ago. And to answer your question directly, Deputy, at the time the answer was no. There was no inventory or way of knowing what particular skills many of these people had. And that was, I suppose, a challenge in terms of trying to figure out where they might find employment once they had the permission to do so. The permission accorded to asylum seekers or people seeking international protection, it's a scheme run by the Department of Justice and Equality. So we don't actually, it's not an employment permit run scheme. But I do recall that in the course of the review we did on economic migration, we set up an interdepartmental committee that is still sitting, and the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection undertook to go out and begin precisely that process, to actually, because they had the expertise and the manpower to do so. So they undertook to start and to go through these as best they could on a regional basis. Now, where they have got to with that exercise, I don't know, but I can find out and get you a response in writing on that. My understanding, and I don't have up-to-date figures, but again, we can get them. My understanding is that there was actually quite a low take-up of employment opportunities from the asylum seeker cohort, which is a pity. But look, we're hopeful that this might change over time.
Can I just ask, weren't the conditions quite difficult though for employers to take on?
No, all jobs are open to asylum seekers.
The minimum salary, that was the issue, I think.
I know there was a minimum wage would have been the minimum salary.
30,000.
Yeah.
Well, you see, it's not an employment permit scheme, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'm surprised at that. I thought it was the minimum wage, but I'll check. Because
I think Senator Humphrey
for an
is correct.
employment
I
permit,
think that's where the issue
yeah.
came.
For an employment permit, it's generally 30,000.
I'm done with the asylum seeker.
Yeah, I'd have to ask the Department of Justice if they set the salary at. But I know one of the other issues was that they were only allowed, they were issued with a permission to work for 6 months initially. It was renewable every 6 months,
Okay.
depending on how they're.
There's no continuity then. I mean, who's going to take a person on that you're guaranteed you can only have 6 months with? So you invest in the training and education, and after 6 months, because of some other process, they're gone again. So that's the difficulty. It's just
You're right.
It's not criticism; they're just observations. But I just think it's
to be honest with you,
area.
I think the issue of asylum seekers is slightly different to the generality of employment permits and how we operate that system, because it's open to people whose application has not been processed within a particular period of time through no fault of their own. Now, it could happen that at the end of the first 6 months of employment, their application could have been processed, and they could either be given permission to stay in the state, at which point the other opportunities would open up to them, or
not processed, and they'd have to renew the
they would, yeah.
permission to work.
They would, yeah, absolutely.
Address the resources and maybe the post-Brexit.
I'll take some of Deputy Kelleher's question. First of all, on management training, because I think this is critical. And you mentioned awareness and cost in the context of this two-speed economy. I'd put time in there as well. I think they're the three elements. SMEs particularly tend to be very time poor. But I think your point on the awareness, I'd agree 100%, and there is sort of empirical evidence supporting that. I was at the Future Jobs Summit last week, and there was an expert from the OECD there who actually was comparing the calibre of management in Irish business, and particularly SME level, with other jurisdictions, and we didn't perform particularly well. So the expert group has kind of been aware of this for a while, and we have decided in our programme for next year to look at the whole issue of management skills. It's a long time since this has actually been sort of subjected to scrutiny. There was a small firms council at one stage, but it seemed to kind of die in the depths of the recession. So I would agree 100%. And fairness, there's an initiative that Enterprise Ireland also is carrying out around equipping the regional skills managers with this toolkit, a sort of skills needs analysis. And I think that's very important, because sometimes it's a case for SMEs of not knowing what you don't know. And the sense that especially a small firm tends to be focused on where are the opportunities, where are the threats. They don't think of skills conceptually. If skills are part of the solution, all well and good, but sometimes they need guidance in linking skills to business strategy, and I think that could be an important part of our armoury. Just on training for the workforce, there has been over the last two budgets, a reprofiling of some of the National Training Fund to in-employment trainings, which I think is pretty good. More money into apprenticeships, which is, an important part of upskilling for the existing workforce. In some instances it is new recruits, but it's also for people who want to change occupations while in employment. We see SkillNet, you mentioned Paul Healy, has actually received a significant increase in the last budget, and also Springboard as well, which is a conversion programme which previously was targeted mainly at labour force activation. Now more of that is profiled towards in-company upskilling, so that's a welcome development. In terms of resources and the pressures of Brexit, I'll defer to my colleague, Mr Daly, here on that, if I could.
Thanks, Tony.
In terms of resources, I run the Secretariat of the EGFSN. We have had an increase in resources in the last 12 months. So the unit is resourced through the department directly and also through the NTF, through the National Training Fund. So we've gone from 4 full-time staff to 5, so that's an increase of 25%. And in terms of our consultancy budget, that's gone up as well by approximately about 30%. So our resources are increasing. I mean, obviously you can always do more if you have more resources, but we're adequately resourced for the agreed work programme at the moment.
So you've gone from 4 to 5?
Yes. We're very productive.
I'd say the 25%, huh?
Yep. In terms of your question around the Brexit and the impact of the skills and the attraction from the UK, I was just looking at the stats that came out yesterday from the CSO, and I was quite surprised, but the full-time average wage in Ireland is 39% higher than the UK. So, yeah, I think just the labour market itself should, the functioning of the market should solve that issue some way, and that people will go to where the highest wages are. So that's the economist in me. We haven't heard any evidence from firms that we talk to about an issue of losing labour to the UK yet. Obviously, Brexit hasn't happened yet. But initially we thought that we might have an upside from Brexit, and that European migrants who might have gone to the UK might come here instead. But again, that's anecdotal, and we haven't seen evidence of it either.
But there is a potential risk that if the UK cuts off the labour pool from Europe, the only labour pool available to it other than itself and its own immigration policy is the common travel area. Is that not a potential risk to us?
It's a potential risk, but I think it's a matter of our firms. They're more productive and they pay better wages, and that should keep the labour here. So it's a warning for firms that they have to keep competitive and keep paying decent wages if they want to keep their staff.
Did you want to come in there?
Yeah. Kevin's covered some of the point that it's also an opportunity as well as a risk, because hopefully Ireland, still within the EU, will be an attractive proposition both to the EU workers who are currently in the UK, but also to the UK nationals who are interested in opportunities in pharma or ICT or life sciences or wherever. So I think it's also an opportunity. Just in terms of that point on Brexit proofing, as I mentioned in the opening statement, we've been agreeing strategic performance agreements, which are very much future-focused planning agreements with education and training boards, which kind of set out a vision for how they're going to provide and meet the region's needs over the next 3 years. You see kind of a strong focus on Brexit, particularly around the regional ETBs, and in terms of how they're working across the border with their kind of further education and training and employer kind of representative counterparts, and that's a big part of the strategy. And I suppose just to touch on the Deputy's first point around that kind of how do you get SMEs to engage in this and how do you upskill the existing workforce. As Mary Liz says, we have a Skills to Advance policy initiative. That's really important because about 900,000 people in Ireland, working people in Ireland, have level 5 or below in terms of educational attainment. We need to find a way to get at that group. So Skills to Advance will offer access to further education and training provision free of charge. There's a target of 17,500 new people receiving training under that scheme over the next 3 years, and that has to be a big part of the strategy, and the education and training boards will be a big part and lever in that, because one thing that struck me is they're incredibly connected to their local communities and their local enterprise base, and they're investing in dedicated employer engagement resources, and they're getting out there to build those links with the SMEs. So I'm hoping over the next kind of 3-4 years you're really going to see, a much closer connectivity with SMEs that allows them to send their workforce into further education and training.
Thank you. Senator Davitt?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose I just have a couple of queries to follow on from Billy there. Firstly, I suppose I have a vested interest to a certain extent. I have, through my business, I have a chap that's working with me that's on an apprenticeship at present, through Lawless evidently. And I have another lady that's with us, and she was doing a course at weekends for 2 years, and she's just finished now as well. So I have quite a lot of experience, I suppose, working with Lawless on and off over the years. I have looked at, just I suppose personally, I have found that the new apprenticeship programme with the auctioneering it certainly seems to be a good course. You know, there are a couple of things that could tweak on it, but there is actually interaction between employers, people that students, you know, and the school itself. There's one been run in Cork, and there's one running Ballsbridge out here, so they seem to be running quite well. I suppose that's all on a lovely note to start you all off here to a great start here anyway. So that's from a practical point of view, but I just have to really query your numbers. Like, for the numbers I have, they don't correlate, or I suppose correlation or real correlation is the numbers you have here, I presume, because they ain't standalone yearly numbers, I presume, from the numbers I have received. You said in 2013, going from 1900 in 2013, okay, and then we had the new activation programme, whatever else, which is 2014, and you're talking about 4,500 people in 2018. I presume that's over 4 years, is it?
No, that's each year. So in 2013 there were 1,929. Sorry, Carl, 1,929 annual registrations, and as of this year, you know, so far there's been 4,500
registrations and
of apprentice registrations.
Okay, and starts, are they two different numbers?
No, no. So that's basically apprentices who are taken on by an employer in any single year. So this year, as of the end of October, we had 4,500 apprentices taken on in 2018 alone, so who started an apprenticeship programme, and that'll actually exceed 5,000 by the end of the year, by the last 2 months of the year added in.
Okay, so then I have a figure then that there was 1,500 registrations. I suppose we're talking it from the other side. We had a figure of 1,500, a target of 1,500 registrations for 2018.
On the new programmes.
On the new programmes, which we're nowhere near meeting,
so
is that fair to say?
We're estimating we'll be at 800 by the end of the year. So
half it.
Yeah.
A little bit over half, or whatever, 55, 57%.
Yeah, and that's where,
and
you know...
I'm just curious to drill into this, like, you know, because I say you are, I have no doubt, and I know you are doing good work, but in the... You know, in the position we're in at present, and like these guys are getting well paid, because you're not paying them well, they wouldn't be with you, like, you know. You know, and they're going to get the qualification after a couple of years or whatever else. I'm just curious how, you know, if we've 1,500 and we only managed to get 800 people on, it's mind-boggling to me in the current situation we're in, or is there something? And I know the previous year was even worse, from what I understand, that the figures were quite poor as well.
335 registrations in 2017, yeah. So, yes. So
for a course that from when we have started from 2015, I think 2014.
So the
we have been
first
working at it from 2014. The figures just seem to be, you know. I'm just curious how we can improve, like, because the figures are they're shocking from my point of view as an employer. And I know that the particular course that the chap I have that's on at present, it was 3 times oversubscribed. And possibly more. That's all I'm only aware of in Dublin. So I'm sure it could be the same in Cork, or possibly more. Like, they actually have a bigger, they end up taking a couple of extra or whatever else in Cork. I don't know. I think their class could be bigger. So I'm just getting hard to, is it, you know, I don't know. Is it budgets? Is it not enough tutors? Is it we're slow coming to the game? But if we're 5 years at it, I don't know how I see how that's the case. I know the auctioneering is only a newer course. I'm aware of that, and I know the same with the insurance and the banking one. But I still believe even in some of the wet trades, it's still hard to get places. It's just not straightforward, like, you know. So why is that the case? I'm curious to find out from Solus.
So, and actually, Tony, who's on the Apprenticeship Council, might want to come in on this as well. So, I mean, there's a very good example. You started with Deputy on Auctioneering. There's 53, brand new programme, only started in the last 6 weeks, 53 apprentices starting off, which actually was really positive as a start-up programme. What's happened is all of the new programmes, without exception, huge numbers of interest, huge number of potential apprentices applying. So in some cases, 5 times more apprentices than were places available. And what's been slower is employers coming on board. So, you know, the numbers of employers who are stepping up and saying, yeah, we're going to take apprentices on these new programmes is slower than we envisaged. Now, the trend is positive and is upwards. So, for example, the insurance apprenticeship, which started in 2016, that number of employers has just grown and grown and grown each year. So, as these programmes become embedded, the numbers are positive. When we started with the targets, I suppose, back in 2016, we were trying to imagine what it was going to be like. We're, I suppose, optimistic that by 2020 we'll have accelerated significantly. But the big challenge, and I suppose we were talking about it in our submission, is to get employers on board. The Apprenticeship Council has been engaging with the new consortia to sort of talk about, well, what's been happening, what's their ambition, what are the issues, and the feedback is that, you know, that it's taking time. For a lot of these employers, the whole concept of apprenticeship is new. So actually switching from a purely graduate-only entry to sort of saying we're going to take people on, we're going to develop them within our workforce is a whole new concept. And for multinationals, for example, they have to figure out things like headcount. They have to, you know, get agreement, and it's slower than was originally envisaged. So, you know, so I think there's a kind of a complex picture there. But I think, you know, we were 335 registrations annually last year. We'll be 800 this year, and we think that it's going to keep accelerating next year and into 2020.
I'm curious, are we not engaging with the employers enough? I'd say that is a complication, and just I will tell you why I think it. We would be one of the larger auctioneers in the Midlands. Nobody asked me would we take them on the course. I had the young guy working with me, and I put him on the course. Nobody. And I know the guy from Solis that's in the area, based in Athlone, whatever. Good guy, he came and see me, all that, but he's busy. He is genuinely busy. I've seen him. He was meeting a couple other guys that day at different stuff. And recently, actually, I had a chap, the first guy that came to me to look to get on the course, I actually told him I had somebody on at present. I knew it was the wrong time anyway, whatever. I sent him down to a neighbouring auctioneering firm, and your man employed him nearly immediately and said he'd have him in his whatever. So I'm just curious, are Solis talking to the employers? If Solis went out and they actively were canvassing the employers, told them the benefits of this, whatever else, you know, there seems to be a mismatch there. I really find there. Like, I never heard anything from Solis, and we would have, you know, over the years we would have been proactive enough in employing people and graduates and apprenticeships and all that sort of stuff. We'd have been very proactive, like, so, and we would have found it very beneficial, like, you know.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of them that were with us have stayed with us, like, so. You know, I would suggest manpower is still a problem with you.
So, well, Deputy, I suppose a couple of things. Absolutely, you know.
Deputy. Robert Troy, I'd love to hear that.
Okay.
Senator. It's okay. There's no problem.
Beg your pardon. So,
Except when Robert Troy is around.
okay.
From his apprenticeship.
From the upper houses, we know.
So I can't see you around.
I know.
Yeah. So I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a huge challenge in terms of promotion and awareness. And back to the point, you know, that was made earlier about, you know, awareness of employers. We have a Generation Apprenticeship campaign which is underway. The new model apprenticeship is very much driven by these industry-led consortia.
The IPAV actually set up that. We're heavily involved in setting up that common sense, whatever. No,
and they're getting funding and support as well to do that engagement also with employers. So it's a, you know, it's not fully done. We're you know, I think you're absolutely right. This is, you know, this is a work in progress, and we need to really step up that. Making sure there's awareness, but also making sure that we know if there are practical barriers to employers taking on apprentices on these new programs, what they are, and then how we support employers. You know, so you know, so I think you're making an absolutely fair point, and I think it's about how we continue on Generation Apprenticeship, on the awareness, and then how we make sure that, you know, that employers are, you know, those numbers continue to increase, and we're supporting the consortia, you know, the auctioneering one, but all the other consortia as well, to make sure that they're getting that message out and building that critical mass of apprenticeships being used, you know, within Irish industry. So.
Just come in there in a supplementary question, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Trant. You spoke about the 4,530. Would you know the percentage that were female?
So 2%.
Still 2%.
2%, yeah.
Okay.
We did a recent Pathways to Apprenticeship review, and the numbers are 2%. And you know, we've got but the positive on that, Kelleher, is that we were at 1% at the beginning of this year, so it's a very small increase. But we've gone from 151 apprentices in 2017 who are women to over 300 this year who are women. So you know, so we're moving in the right direction. However, there's a lot more to be done on that, and in the Pathways to Review, we have a number of practical actions that we're going to be implementing now with all partners to not just increase the number of women in apprenticeships, but right across the board, the full range of diverse groups and career changers who want to access apprenticeship as well.
Just to finish off, just briefly, sorry, Maurice, just briefly to finish off, I'm just curious, maybe it might be directed more to Tony, just as an employer then, where you have someone, you let them off for 1 day a week to go to college and whatever else, it's probably, you're paying them on the average rate of the industry anyway. They're away a day in college learning, you're still paying them at the rate you're paying them, and the employer's not getting, it might be something that's not helping employers. I know they're in the trades originally. I know with some of the guys with engineering and different things like that, there was a sort of a grant or a bit of a grant in relation to apprenticeships. That isn't, well, not in our industry, isn't present. So I'm just curious, is there more that it would be definitely a help to employers anyway?
Can I answer that, Chair? I would agree. In fact, the off-the-job, sorry, by the way, I'm here under wearing a specific hat, which is chair of the expert group, and I swore that I wouldn't comment outside that, but you've tempted me. I'm putting on my IBEC hat now. Yeah, I think you make a very good point, and we've been frustrated at the speed of take-up, but it probably shouldn't be surprising. It's quite a major change project. I think you've put your finger on one particular issue. The craft apprenticeships, by the way, are still supported by for their off-the-job training by the state. Through income support. So you've got this dual system now where the new apprenticeships aren't and the older apprenticeships are. I don't know how long that anomaly can carry on. We've definitely got feedback from smaller firms in particular. That's an impediment. Funny enough, it's not as bad when it's 1 day a week, but some of the apprenticeships are actually structured around block release. And there's one I can think in particular where the apprentice doesn't arrive for about 12 weeks and the employer is paying. So that's obviously that's an issue. I think awareness is huge, and you know, while we welcome generation apprenticeship, I've always argued that we should be focusing our marketing on employers, because if you don't have employers offering apprenticeships, you won't have apprenticeships. It's as simple as that. I think there's one initiative that's actually in the document that Mary Liz mentioned, in the Pathways document, which probably should have happened if we'd figured this out in time earlier, which is a portal where employers from any group would actually advertise their apprenticeships. At the moment, it's down to the individual consortia. I don't know what the auctioneers are doing, but I know the Insurance Institute or the Construction Industry Federation or Financial Services Ireland, these different industry consortia are advertising apprenticeships, but you actually need a central portal where employers can post the apprenticeships, and then whether young people, their families, guidance counsellors, whoever, can know where to get them. You need a kind of an online marketplace there. So I think if you address those three things of cost, a dedicated marketing campaign, and it actually does feed into Deputy Kelleher's point about creating demand for upskilling amongst small firms as well, and a unified portal, you could actually make some progress. But as somebody who's been frustrated at the speed of this, I do think it is gathering momentum. And I think the model was right, and I think we're on the right road here, and it would have been better if it happened quicker, but look, these things take time sometimes.
Thank you. We good to go. Deputy Quinlivan, you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll come in with my comments, my questions or whatever, so I was going...
Senator Humphreys, please.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, very welcome, and Mary Liz, you're getting most of the questions, so I'll keep them brief to you, first of all. It's interesting, kind of my last days in the private sector, I negotiated a deal for shop floor workers, which gave an individual education and training budget to the employee, and that was part of the salary package. And I was actually at the time encouraged by SIT to go down that line in relation to upskilling and automation, that you can actually see that the jobs are going to go and how you actually prepare a workforce for change and to be able to stay in the industry. But just in relation to, again, it's lifelong learning, it's upskilling. And in relation to automatisation, is there a way in relation, first of all, to encourage employers into investing in this? And is there a role to expand tax relief for employees that are on the average industrial wage, actually go up to upskill? And have we looked at that? One of the things I don't think, as a country or as a state or as a society, we don't actually value apprenticeships enough and what they can contribute to society. And I'm just wondering, has there been any research done in relation to the cost of bringing an apprentice through the system compared to a graduate, and then the economic gain then to society in relation, so kind of a cost-benefit analysis? Because, certainly, if you look at the low-skilled worker, there's been less investment by the state or by society in educating them, but they don't necessarily be able to hook in at later in life. So, should there be really an educational budget to an individual for life, and you can pick up? It mightn't suit you to go to university at 18, but it might suit you to go at 28. And some kind of budget that would carry with the person through life, because society is changing so rapidly. The other question which we heard at this committee is in relation to high-skilled workers, and you dealt with it partially in relation to the permit scheme. But one of the issues that's been raised with me is people that wants to travel at Christmas, and they have to surrender their passport to get the permit. And the indications they had got from their colleagues is the passport mightn't got. We heard the evidence here at that committee. So can we give some guarantees in relation to people that are in that position, is that if they do have to send their passport in to get a permit, that it would be returned to them in sufficient time to travel? And that was a very strong evidence that was given at this committee. And it just, if it's wrong, let's kill it. But that's what that was said here. There was a protest outside the Leinster House this morning in relation to Stamp 4 visas, and it's something I come across on a regular time, because I have major hospitals close by, high-tech industries, where we've encouraged high-skilled people into the country, but their partners are left in limbo. And is there any work getting done in relation to that? Now, I thought the figures you did in Ms. Dunn in relation to GEVA is the October figure of 1,520 permits that were issued, and the kind of growth. A concern I had was, especially in relation to low paid workers, that would be used as a salary cap in relation to the industry. So where markets dry that they need workers, the salaries increase, and if employers are using as permits coming in. And I would have a direct question in relation to the pilot scheme of the 800 visas, and just how many of those new permits are related to the pilot scheme. Is it 100? Is it 200? Is it 300? And I would have concerns. There's very clear conditions in relation to that pilot scheme in relation to English language classes and accommodation, but there's no inspection regime other than complaint. So the employer, the employer is just checking now, but it's just in relation to answers I got. The employers relate. I can't find it as it thinks. The employers relation commission react only to a complaint, but the permit is tied to the employer. So if I was somebody coming in here from Brazil to work in a meat factory, and I wasn't getting my entitlements in relation to accommodation or training, but if if I made a complaint, I could lose my visa, be sent home, and then the complaint disappears. So there has to be, in my mind, if we're running pilot schemes, there has to be an inspection regime that's clear, can be checked and can be validated. And from PQ questions I got, there doesn't seem to be that was asked, PQ questions that was asked in the Dáil, there doesn't seem to be that validation scheme in relation to it's only on response to what I would call a complaint. So if that's the fact, somebody like that would be pretty much just an indentured servant and be used to keep a salary cap in low-paid work.
Thank you. Ms Dunn, do you want to start there?
Thanks, Senator. Okay, I'll deal with your questions in the sequence that you asked them. The first issue around surrendering a passport for a work permit, that simply doesn't happen. Now, we do not require anybody's passport. We do require a copy of the passport, just a copy of the relevant page, but we never ask for a passport. So just to nail that one.
That was something raised here a fortnight ago. That
no, it doesn't. Well, that's not us, Kevin.
yeah, I think it was the Department of Justice asked for it.
Perhaps, yeah.
So therefore, it's something that the two departments need to work together on, because certainly a high-skilled worker that would return, that would go without the permit, go back, may not bother to come back again, and an employer would have done investment. So, if there seems to be kind of a gap between the two of you, needs to be pulled together a little bit closer.
But just to be clear, so from your point of view, the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, a copy of the passport suffices?
Suffices, absolutely.
That's perfect, thank you.
I don't disagree with you, Deputy, but just to be clear, they are two separate systems. We work very, very closely with the Department of Justice and Equality. I am in regular contact with the head of Innis, and we have both agreed that we need to work even more closely together. We meet regularly. Our next meeting is on Thursday afternoon of this week when our two senior teams are meeting. There are issues that need to be addressed, including Stamp 3, and greater synergies between the employment permit system and the visa system. Completely accept that. And so does my colleague in the Department of Justice. So we are committed to driving change where we can to streamline the processes. Just to put that on the record, that we are very mindful of the fact that we need to be working ever more closely together. So to nail the passport thing, I suppose, first of all, Kelleher, we don't ask for passports. Maybe Justice do, and I will check that.
The committee get a clarification, and I think it's important because we need to hammer that as well. If it is justice that's the problem, is we need to follow that through.
Absolutely. In fact, with your permission, Chair, what I would propose is that at our meeting on Thursday afternoon, I will raise all of these questions with Justice and come back to you with a joint reply.
That would be fantastic. We need to get clarity on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So that's the first thing. Your second question was around the Stamp 3 issue and the spouses of dependent spouses or partners of critical skills permit holders. Now, the stock answer is that they have almost full access to the labour market. We don't require a labour market needs test. They don't have to pay for their permits. So that is the fact. The reality is that there is a perception problem out there, that employers feel that somebody with a Stamp 3 visa, because in fact when I realised it's actually it's stated on the Stamp 3 visa that they're not allowed to work. That is a problem. They are allowed to work. Once they can apply for a job, apply for a work permit, they will get a change of visa status. But again, I accept that this has created problems. In the short term, we as a department have done what we can. We have put a notification up on our website to explain exactly what the situation is. And we have also issued what we call sort of letters of support to people in receipt of critical skills employment permits, people applying for a critical skills employment permit, so that they can see very clearly that if they have a spouse or a dependent partner that seeks to work, they have absolutely almost full access to that. The only work that they're not allowed to do is domestic work. As long as they work more than 10 hours a week and as long as they're paid the minimum wage, they can take any job in the economy. But you're right, there is a perception issue around that. It's one of the things that Justice and ourselves are working very closely on to find a solution, hopefully in the short term. So I'm hoping that that will be addressed. I have met with the Stamp 3 Association. I spent a lot of time with them. And I was certainly an education, and I know that my colleagues in Justice met them shortly afterwards. So we're very alive to the problem. We want to rectify it because, very much the critical skills permit is as it says, critical. So we want to make it as attractive. So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have a resolution fairly quickly. You asked about low skills and people coming in and pilot schemes at sort of lower wages. We're very mindful. I mean, I think I said it in the opening statement. Up until fairly recently, we have been very much engaged at the higher end of the skills market and the higher end of the salary levels. But it has become apparent that there are shortages at the lower skills and lower wage end in certain sectors, including agriculture, in particular agriculture, I suppose, and was there
Tourism?
Yeah. Well, chefs, we took certain chefs off the ineligible list, but in terms of their salary cap is still 27,500. No, sorry, it's 30,000 because they're higher end chefs. We pitched the salary at 22,000, which is above the minimum wage. And that was in an effort to, the sectors involved wanted the wages to be lower than that. But having looked at it in consultation with the interdepartmental group, we felt that 22 was as low as we could possibly go with that particular cohort. And we are mindful of the fact, we have to look at what's happening in the marketplace. We don't want to be presiding over a system that's driving wages down at all. And if anything, what we're looking at is we're looking to, particularly for the general employment permit, is the next on our list, and the critical skills employment permit, we're looking to increase the minimum salary thresholds there to keep them in line with what they should be sort of pegged against, which is the average annual earnings. In terms of the numbers that have come in, the meat dip owners, we allowed 360 meat dip owners there. That's a very skilled occupation, and the salary level there was agreed at 27,500. We have just fairly recently exhausted that quota, so 360 out of 360 have been filled. So we're not issuing any further permits for meat dip owners at the moment. For HGV drivers, again, their salary is 30,000. We issued a quota of 120, and 57 of that quota has been taken up to date. For chefs, the quota it wasn't 610, it was slightly lower than that. We have issued 170 of the allowed quota for chefs to date.
Just to be clear, is this non-EEA now you're talking about?
Non-EEA.
Yeah.
This is outside of...
Yeah.
This is part, just to be clear, is part of the pilot scheme that was launched, the 800 visas,
The pilot scheme
which was 22,000.
The pilot scheme was for the agri-food sector, and just on that particular one...
Did that include meat boners?
No, meat dip owners were separate. That was done...
separate document.
Yeah.
And does the 27.5 include the shift rate, unsociable hours, or are we expecting that to work for that rate as unsociable hours?
It has to be a guaranteed 27,500 for a 39-hour week.
Does that include unsociable hours or not?
Well, if any overtime would have to be paid on top of that.
No, it's not overtime, it's unsociable hours, shift rate. Because otherwise you're having a depressing cost on the market. If you're bringing somebody working in for 27.5 on unsociable hours, and an Irish meat owner is working for 27.5 plus unsociable hours, shift premium, you're already causing a problem in relation to the market.
Okay, we checked that.
You're depressing the salaries.
We understand a 39-hour week is what we're paying, but we check the shift hours and we get back to you.
Figures, please.
For chefs, we have issued 170 permits so far this year. In agri-food, for meat processors, which are not deboners, now this is a lower skilled occupation, this is the 22,000, we have, as of today, issued just shy of 750 permits. And there is a further application in from that sector seeking another 750 on top of the 750. So we're looking at that evidence at the moment. For the dairy sector,
Just ask one question there, just
Sure.
while you're going through the figures. Is you look at the unemployment rate just over 5% nationally, but a lot of these positions arrive in where there's higher unemployment rates. So are we in some manner ensuring that there's an opportunity for training up into those positions? So like in the meat sector is based in rural Ireland, where the unemployment figures are much higher. So is that taken into consideration?
for meat deboners, for example, one of the conditions of granting the permits for deboners was that they put in place upskilling programs for the general population, so that over time, and I think SkillNets would have been running, I don't know if the guys here know anything about that, but certainly upskilling was very much tied into the issuing or the granting of those permits, and we understand that has happened.
The inspection regime in relation to the upskilling is?
I couldn't tell you.
It's done?
I couldn't tell you offhand, but
No,
it would be
grateful if you come back and don't
absolutely.
expect it.
No, but and I'll talk to you about the WRC in a second in terms of no problem.
Just a supplementary. See, in terms of the meat companies, and they would be in the lower skilled category. Like what checks have you made in terms of the locations that they're in, the unemployment levels? Obviously, you have a range of local agencies that would be helping people to attain work. I mean, the concern, and we dealt with this at the last session, that one of the concerns we would have is that work permits would not be utilised as a way of keeping wages low. Have you looked at the wage policy of those sectors in terms of the local? I mean, is it a case that the wages that they're offering are just not in any way acceptable? I'd like to get a sense of how robust that your policies are to sectors, and to make sure that they're not utilising the permit option as a way of keeping wages low in the sector. And the other point is, remember that sector, there would be a sense, for example, in primary producers and farmers, that they don't get a fair price for their produce. So there's a sense that there's huge profitability in that sector already, that they don't give a fair price to the primary producer. So that's one issue. And then a second issue then is that there would be a concern that they're utilising the permit process to keep wages low. So in both ways, you've got suspicion, at the very least, of profiteering being facilitated by the state.
Come back in there, please.
Certainly. I suppose the first point to make is that we don't issue permits on a regional basis. We issue, our system is vacancy-led. So where there are vacancies in a particular company or plant, and they apply for a permit, they fulfil all of the conditions, they will get a work permit, regardless of where they're based. Second point, I suppose, with regard to wage levels, we're very clear that neither the department nor the work permits regime is in the business of setting wages across the economy. We would have certain minima in place, if you like, to ensure precisely that we're not unnecessarily displacing domestic workers. In the particular case of the meat processing sector, the level that we set at 22,000, I think it's probably not a secret to say that met with quite strong resistance from the sector. They felt that was too high. General operatives in the meat processing sector, as was advanced in the case made, and certainly we have engaged extensively with the Department of Agriculture on this, are lower than the 22,000 that we insisted upon. So we certainly are mindful of the fact that we do not want in any way to be party to driving wages down. I think, I don't know if that answers your question.
Just as I promise this is the last supplementary on this issue. So just to be clear, in terms of the permits that you have facilitated for the meat processing sector, that the wage level is €22,000 for those positions, and what the meat processing industry are telling you is that we cannot fill these positions in the local labour market where they're and they've given demonstrable evidence that they can't fill those positions.
Not only can they not fill them locally, I mean, we have now. Sorry, we're not. We are encouraging them to keep trying, because we're very mindful in the department that even though we're at almost full employment, there are still 120,000 unemployed. There's 210 or something thousand on the live register. All of these people are in receipt of state payments. So clearly, our preference is for employers to be able to source their labour needs and skills needs as locally as possible without the need for work permits. So we are satisfied that that in the case of this sector, for these jobs, that these people have made genuine efforts across the EEA, and we have lots of evidence where they have gone out to jobs fairs, they have gone to the Baltic states, all of the Eastern European countries that used to be a very rich source of employment for Ireland. But now they're not so interested because their economies are improving, their wage levels are improving, and they're taking the decision to stay at home, or they're going to countries like Poland is now importing significant labour to do jobs that they can't get people in Poland to do. So some of these people are not prepared to come as far as Ireland, to be frank with you. But we are very mindful of that. And I mean, we're also mindful of the fact that we cannot, as I said in the opening statement, work permits are not a permanent solution. So we cannot accept a sector that keeps coming back again and again and again looking for work permits. If that's the case, their problem is with retention. And my understanding of this sector is that not everybody wants to work in a meat plant. I haven't visited one myself. But it's difficult. It's difficult work.
Yeah, it's tough work.
It's tough work. Absolutely. So that is the reality. But at the same time, these companies need to work on retention. They need to put in place some training and upskilling for these people so that they have some level of progression in their sites when they go in at the entry level. And this is all part of what we have agreed with the sector as part of allowing these permits. They also have to guarantee to us that the people coming in these permits will have access to suitable accommodation, because that's another concern of ours. Once you start tinkering with the work permit system or the labour market and bringing people in from outside of the immediate environment, you're into all sorts of knock-on effects in terms of very low wages, access to state supports, looking for housing, infrastructure pressure, all of that. So we're trying to strike a balance here between allowing these processing firms to keep on to stay in business and to fill overseas orders, and yet to get them to improve the terms and conditions so that more people will want to go into them.
Deputy Quinlivan, you've been waiting patiently.
If you could get me questions finished, because you just touched on it there, it was in relation to adequate housing. So, I just found it's the Labour Relations Commission has responsibility in relation to the checks, but what checks have ever been carried out in relation to adequate accommodation, and what is the definition of adequate accommodation and educational, because part of the pilot scheme is actually in English classes.
Yep.
And to what level and who provides it, and then who's monitoring it, because and I just asked one other question supplementary in relation to that, is you were talking about employers had to ensure to you that they had made adequate efforts to fill those. Is there a check sheet that actually, somebody rings the intro office? Because I remember a very strong case being put to me for one particular sector, and I rang the local intro office at the time to find out that there was more than adequate people in the intro office that could fill those positions. So is there a very basic thing of a check sheet when you come in, is that the intro offices in those areas are actually rang, checked and seen as there's staff there with a small amount of training could fill those positions?
Yeah.
Ms. Dunn again.
Okay. We're working very closely with the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection on all of this. And probably we've never worked more closely with them than we're currently working over the last 6 months or so. And they are the ones who give us the assurance that there are real efforts being made on the part of these companies overseas. When I say overseas, I mean within the EEA, to attract workers in. So that's what they're telling us. Now, there's a process. This is not just a one-off that it happens. You know, you decide on something today, the quota. We're working assiduously with the sector. When I say we, I mean the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection and ourselves in the department, and where necessary also the Department of Justice and Equality, doing lots of outreach, meeting the sector, explaining to the sector, but also making sure that the sector engages in a real and meaningful way with DEASP before they come back to us looking for an extension of their quotas. So as best we can, we believe that we have that covered off at the moment, but we are keeping a very, very close eye on that. Just maybe to finish, Cahill, on the WRC, now I don't have full information of each and every check, but I am aware that the WRC have gone out and they have inspected some of the sites that received work permits in terms of the meat processing pilot scheme. Now, the information I got back is that they have looked at several of these plans, and they have all been found to be fully compliant with the terms and conditions of the permits. Now, the terms and conditions include access to suitable housing, provision of language training and things like that. I will ask the WRC.
Because there's a contradiction is because the WRC has told my office, and after inquiring, is that they only react to a complaint. No. And they didn't give me any. They hadn't any records of an inspection, either English language or accommodation. So there's obviously a mix-up between offices because we've two different answers.
The WRC do react to complaints. Obviously, that's
yes.
a key part of their role. But they also undertake unannounced inspections, sometimes at our request, and sometimes it's risk-based. And maybe a new scheme like this would be on their radar as something that could be open to.
Could the committee get the information of the number of inspections?
Sure.
And I think it would be helpful. Thanks.
No
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, you're welcome. Deputy Quinlivan.
Thanks very much. I want to go back to the issue of apprenticeships, and as part of Solis's contribution, you said the programme for government and the action plan for education contains a commitment to having a cumulative 31,000 enrolments in apprenticeships between 2016 and 2020. So the reason I'm asking my questions now is I'd be concerned that you'd reach that, and how confident would you be on you reaching that? And I ask those questions because the targets are set out in the government's action plan on apprenticeships have been missed in 2016, 17 and 18, and it seems they're going to be missed again in 2018. The action plan set out a target of 82 apprentices in new courses in 2016, and that was not met. 2017 had a target of 800 registrations on new courses, but only 335, as we discussed already, were only achieved. And in 2018, it was estimated 1,500 would take part in new courses, but according to the figures we received was 509. Yourself there, you said 800 plus. I'd be interested to know where that came from. And there's only 1 month left to go in 2018. So it's clearly something is going wrong. I know we've discussed a lot of it, but I would be interested to know exactly what you feel has gone wrong, why people haven't come in. Senator Davitt mentioned that there probably wasn't enough contact with employers, and I would echo that. Mr. Donoghue there referenced the fact that we should probably have a central portal, and that's something I would agree with as well, so that people who don't know people might be able to access an apprenticeships, and that would be an issue, especially in areas of urban deprivation, or people who mightn't know the business person to go. So I would really, the targets are being missed, and is there anybody going to take responsibility for that? And I just want to raise two further issues, and it's the rate of participation of both females, which has been mentioned already, but also people with disabilities. And it's really astonishing to think that only 319 female apprenticeships out of a population of, what was it, 13,921, so 2%, as you said yourself. And in addition, I was told by Solis that the records indicate 371 people on disabilities, again, just roughly 2% again, and these are totally unacceptable figures. So I'd like to know what particular plans are afoot to address the participation rate of both females and people with disabilities as part of that, and my other questions as well.
Thank you. Ms. Trant.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Kelleher Quinlivan. I suppose what we said is, I mean, you mentioned I talked about a figure of an estimated 800 by the end of this year. So the figure of 510 was at the end of October. So the consortia, we've got a range of, the auctioneering programme was mentioned. There's a range of programmes that are still rolling out and registering apprentices. So, we're working on the basis of what each consortia have told us they're aiming for by the end of the year. So the estimate is 800. That is in effect a year behind. We were aiming for 800 in 2017. It looks like we'll have that number by the end of this year. I suppose a lot of our efforts have been focused on, why that is the case, why we are in effect a year behind. And it is very much, as we were saying earlier, there's a huge demand from potential apprentices, but it's about getting employers on board and getting them signing up, buying into apprenticeship and starting to use it as a pipeline. As we there are a number of things that need to happen. We are engaging with the consortia on just the feedback on what's happening with them, why it's taking longer to get employers on board. They are saying this is positive, but just look, patience, please. This is taking a little bit more time than anybody originally envisaged, but it is going in the right direction. And I suppose that's a message that the council has been listening to, and sort of even on the state side in terms of supporting these apprenticeships to keep going, to give them time to ramp up. That investment needs to be made. It may well be that we get to 2020 and we're still slightly behind, but our expectation is that that the numbers will continue to grow. In 2019, we're aiming to have over 30 more new programmes underway. So by the end of 2019, we won't have 42 new programmes. We'll actually have more like 60, 65 plus, 70 even. So straight away, the numbers of employers and apprentices is going to increase significantly next year. And really, it's about, I suppose, all of our efforts going into that awareness bit. We are, as part of Generation Apprenticeship, we're going to have a whole element of employer engagement, employer awareness next year. That's going to roll out from January onwards, and it's just keeping that momentum going that that Tony was mentioning, that we have now at this stage, and just making sure that we continue to support that. Just regarding pathways, and you mentioned, Deputy, obviously the element of women in apprenticeship and also people with disabilities in apprenticeship. We have the figure is actually 2.75 of the population declare a disability at the moment, which is, again, extremely low. Education and training boards and institutes of technology, where somebody declares a disability, they have arrangements in place and supports to make sure that people, are actually able to proceed. And employers are very good as well. We have a lot of case studies or examples of where employers are supporting with people with disabilities who are apprentices to, to complete their training and to be really valuable members of the workforce and members of companies. We have a range of steps again set out to sort of see, I suppose, to first of all get a better handle on, there's the 2.75 are people who declare disability. There could well be more hidden disabilities. How do we support, have universal design and supports to make sure that people don't necessarily have to identify but can succeed? And also that positive message that apprenticeship, the overall system and employers want to welcome people with disabilities and see people with disabilities as a very positive part of their workforce and how they see the the diversity of their companies going forward. So there's a range of actions in the Pathways report, and we can send it on afterwards. That report, it's on our website, apprenticeship.ie and solace.ie, but we can send it on for members also. So there's a number of steps there to build awareness, encourage supports, and I suppose just again to make sure that if there are practical barriers, that we're working through those with employers in the first instance, but also with the education and training providers.
Can I just come back in?
You can, yeah.
Basically, the idea of the portal that Mr. Donoghue. We're at an advanced stage in developing that. We're actually due to be piloting the portal next month with a group of employers, and basically the approach is going to be that employers are going to be able to put up vacancies. It'll be through apprenticeship.ie, so it'll be it's building that one-stop shop approach to all information, and then apprentices will be able to get the information and then have that visibility
accessibility. You made the point, Deputy, about where there isn't, if you don't have a network, if you don't have contacts, if you don't know somebody who's already taking on apprentices or it's in the family, it can be very hard to see where the opportunities are. So the idea is with the portal that we'll really expand that out, and it'll also, in a very practical way, contribute to the overall awareness. So where there are employers already advertising vacancies, word of mouth is sort of like, well, we're taking on apprentices, why aren't you, in a local or a regional area? So we think, we're expecting it to roll out fully early in the new year, and we think hopefully it'll be a very positive contribution to the whole project.
Just to come back on the rolling out in the new year, you're talking about publicising it more. Have you any specific stuff you're going to be doing, like extra advertising? Are you going to secondary schools? What are you doing to do that?
So there's a...
the perception the parents are not that keen on their child doing an apprenticeship. They want them to go to third level. So we're trying to break down that barrier and show that apprenticeships are a good progression in life. And we have a network of 47 officers around the country who work with employers and within ETBs. They do a huge amount. I mean, some of them do up to 3-4 visits to schools a week, and we, the support's provided to them to engage, to get those conversations going. Parents are a huge constituency as well, and we're linking in with the National Parents Council and so on. I mean, this is all about, in a way, a big transformation, that mentioned a big change project where parents, potential young people and career changers see apprenticeship as a real option, where they're thinking about what they want to do when they leave school or later in their careers, and they're sort of saying, actually, apprenticeship could really, as an earn and learn opportunity, is a really interesting option. When they're looking at the full range of what they might do when to further their career and develop their career. So there's a lot of that work going on. I mentioned career guidance counsellors there, obviously, and teachers in schools, hugely important influences as well. We're working with the Institute of Guidance Counsellors. Beatrice Dooley there is actually introducing continuous professional development for guidance counsellors, which specifically briefs guidance counsellors on apprenticeship and traineeship and all work-based learning. So again, just making sure that when students in schools are, are thinking and talking about what they want to do, that all of these opportunities are very much available to them and they know about them as well.
Senator McLaughlin, do you want to come back in to conclude your
questions? Yes, please. A number of questions. Firstly, for the expert group, Mr. Donoghue and your colleague, Mr. Daly, what sectors are currently facing skill shortages? And then, do you believe any additional sectors will face skill shortages in the next few years? So just to get a response on that in a second. For Solace. The issue came up in the previous hearing in relation to employers and the cost of new apprenticeships during block releases for training. Particularly, this is an issue for SMEs, a cost issue. So are there any plans to introduce funding to cover these costs? And then also, we heard about that the legislation governing apprenticeships should be updated. Do you agree that the legislation should be updated in relation to that? For Ms Dunn and Mr Walsh in the department, in the previous hearing, and we've gone through this, but it's just to reaffirm it, that there are real issues with the Department of Justice and delays that are impacting on the issuing of permits. I would just ask maybe Kelleher that the Department of Justice would make some type of submission in response to the issues raised at the previous. Maybe time won't allow for them to come in before us, but I do think we should ask the Department of Justice to give us a response to the issues raised at the previous hearing, because to me they were quite significant issues and they're reiterated here again today. So there's no need for you to respond, Ms Dunn, but I appreciate your offer to raise it at the meeting on Thursday. I think it's really important that they be aware that there are real concerns that are being articulated. A few more questions for Mr Brownlee and Ms Trant and Solace. Resources, are you happy that the expansion plans that have been outlined here and in the plan Are you happy that you are resourced adequately in Solace to meet those targets? And have you requested additional resources to meet those targets? So just to get a sense of that. Also, you'll note that I asked Mr. Donoghue and Mr. Daly from the expert group around the issue of industries that are struggling. Maybe you could just elaborate on that too, from your experience, what sectors are struggling to find skilled workers. And then also maybe a question for either the expert group or Solace to respond to. Are these shortages impacting on FDI investment? Mr. Donoghue might want to think about the second hat again in relation to that issue. So that'll do. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Kelleher.
Thank you, Senator. Whoever wants to kick off. Yep,
I'll take the first one was directed to the expert group, and I suppose the first thing I'd point out is that we probably need to get our terminology between skill shortages and labour shortages. I think some of the discussion earlier was very much around labour shortages. Sometimes we're running out of people who are prepared to do a particular job, and in terms of skills, though, which is the remit of this group, much broader than it was. I suppose the sector, and this has been perennial, it was all the way through the recession we had a shortage of ICT skills in its broadest sense. I mean, even in the depths of the recession, because there's an international war for talent there, if you like. Every country in the world is looking for ICT engineering technologists. We're living in a technological age, and it's not actually, funny enough, just the sector. It's itself. We're particularly exposed because we've got and this comes back to your final question on FDI as well, because we've got all the top ICT companies located here. They tend to hoover up a lot of this talent, whereas I think it's about a third of ICT openings actually aren't in the sector. There's very few industries that doesn't require ICT skills now, and that pace is accelerating. You know, it goes into services, particularly financial services, but across the whole range of industries, they're looking for ICT staff. Now, we haven't published the report yet, but we did a piece of research, a significant piece of research on future skills demand in ICT for the next few years, and this is to underpin the Skills Action Plan, and we looked at different scenarios, you know, a low growth, high growth, and a middle scenario, and even at a middle scenario, we're looking at about 8.5% per year. So that's huge on a cumulative impact basis. I'll leave it to Kevin to answer some of those other sectors, but just before I do, I'd make the point that it's it occurred to me when you were having that discussion about apprenticeships, the way we do policy is very much around sectors and industry groups. A lot of the gaps now are actually in occupations that spread across sectors, and I think that could be something of an issue with our apprenticeships as well, because I can see there's a lot of occupations, and the one that sort of strikes me is sales and marketing. There is no company in the country who wouldn't take on a very good sales and marketing person, but we don't structure our calls and our policy analysis that way. So I suppose I'm making that point. It's not just about sectors, but I mean, it's the way they're horizontal kind of skills gaps. But I'd leave it to Kevin to take up on some of the others, maybe.
Sure. You stole my thunder with the ICT piece.
Yeah.
So it's a good point Tony's made about looking at occupations rather than sectors, because the shortages will appear in occupations, and people are quite flexible going across sectors if they have the skills. Obviously, ICT is number one, and this report we will produce in the next couple of weeks shows it's a big problem, and it's getting worse, and we should have that in the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't say there's sectors experiencing shortages, but there are certain occupations within sectors. For example, in construction, we hear that there's it's not the ones you might expect, but it's niche trades like shuttering carpenters or perhaps scaffolders, but very niche trades. This is where the shortages are appearing at the moment. There's an excellent report by the Solus Labour Market Research Unit called the National Skills Bulletin, which is due out very soon, I believe, and that has the top level analysis on where shortages are appearing and the very niche type of skills that are in shortage, so I'll have a look at that when it comes out. Other areas, again, it's niche, is in finance, particularly people with deep analytical skills and can apply that with financial skills as well. That's an area of shortage. Hospitality, you've obviously heard about lots and chefs, and the employment permit system has reacted to that. So at this stage of the economic cycle, I know we're down to 5.5%, but we're not seeing widespread shortages apart from ICT. It's a niche, and obviously as the economy recovers more and more, it will become more prevalent and more skills. Your last question was, are shortages impacting on investment? I guess we're competing with other European countries generally for our foreign investment anyway, and a lot of them are experiencing the same shortages as we are. So obviously I can't answer your question definitively, but it's not something the IDA have raised to us as being a key factor in losing investments. And Ireland is quite an attractive country to come to because obviously we're English speaking, and a lot of people around the globe now learn English as a second language, so it's an attractive destination for migrants.
Thank you. Just before we conclude this section, Ms Dunn, can I just ask you one question myself, please? You spoke earlier about the extra demand for permits and that the waiting list had increased, I suppose, outside of your control. And I'm just wondering, you said you're hoping to have it back within, normal time frames, 2 weeks and 4 weeks for standard. So my question is, were you able to employ extra staff, or did you redeploy from within the department, or... if you wouldn't mind, please.
Sure, certainly. Maybe before I answer that, Kelleher, can I just clarify a question that Senator Humphreys asked earlier about the 27,500 salary level for meat tube owners? Just to confirm that is basic salary, doesn't include shift work. That is additional. Shift work is additional, as is overtime. So just to, sorry, I didn't have that at the tip of my... That's what I thought, but I didn't want to be categoric. I suppose, in answer to your question, Kelleher, it's a combination of all of the things that you mentioned. We redeployed staff within the unit. We got additional staff, secured additional staff across the department. We're looking for even more additional staff, because when the increases began to appear, we would have probably thought that they were sort of temporary spikes, and we tended to cover off by using overtime. But I am now convinced, and it doesn't, all we're hearing today as well, this is a structural change in terms of where the economy is going. And I have made that point in the department, and the Minister and Secretary General are very supportive of ensuring that work permits is adequately resourced. So it is a structural change, and we are looking for even, more staff when it's not. We're still talking, it's reasonably modest, but we will need more permanent staff in work permits. But the graphs are going the right way. As of tomorrow, we'll be down to 11 weeks for standard applications, and we're at 7 for trusted partners. 5. We were at 7. 5 is the maybe just to make the point that when we're at full tilt, and even now, we pretty much outperform most of our neighbouring countries who are looking at turnaround times of between 3 and 6 months for the generality of permits, be they critical skills or standard. So we do perform pretty well when we're at full tilt, even when we're struggling, under the additional applications. Where we're managing to bring that back into what is approaching acceptable. And I would imagine that early in the new year we'll be back to what we would prefer. I mean, we are customer driven. We hate, to sort of be this much out of kilter, and we're doing absolutely everything we can to bring it back.
Thank you very much. Aidan, did you? Sorry.
Sorry, there's a couple of questions that asked.
Oh, you asked. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Just I suppose just in response, there was a first question from Senator on the cost of employers and block release apprenticeships. So there are a number of the new apprenticeships that use that block release model, with others doing the 1 day off. So we've been getting the feedback from the consortia on this, and what's emerging is that yes, where there are apprenticeships based on block release, there is a struggle, employers struggle to backfill and then to pay the salary, and they have asked that question, look, what can be done? So we've taken that feedback and we're going to look at it. Interestingly, the employers that are, the apprenticeships which are on a 1 day, 4 days on, 1 day off, they've told us straight up, look, it's not actually an issue, we can manage this. So, so there's a mix, I suppose, but we are taking that feedback on board because, just to make sure that if there is an issue, that we're looking at it and considering it, and obviously that'll feed into any policy considerations by the department. On the legislation, when this whole project got going, we had the 1967 Act, and I suppose it was very much about saying, look, we can go and do a whole new piece of legislation, or we can get started and use the legislation we have, and that's what we've done. Interestingly, it actually, by and large, has served us, pretty well. There are elements that, if you were looking at a whole new piece of legislation, would be different, but it's working. There are a few small tweaks that we need to do related to the kinds of apprenticeships that are going to be introduced next year in the agricultural area and horticulture, fisheries and so on, and those tweaks will be made. So, for the moment, it's working. On resources, we've actually expanded in Lawless, and we've expanded out in the regions as well in ETBs to support apprenticeships. So any requests that we've made have been granted. So that has been very good, very, very supportive. And just, I suppose, a couple of points on the shortages and on sectors struggling to find skilled workers. The example of chefs, which Claire mentioned earlier, we now have over 150 chef apprentices in the system. We had none this time last year, and then by the end of the year we had 24. We have 130 this year. So immediately, that's where apprenticeship is meeting a need in a particular industry that we know has been crying out for skilled workers. And you may have heard there's a new chef's charter now has been developed by the Chef Network to really drive the image and within the industry, and that's really positive. And we're working very closely with the Restaurant Association of Ireland and the Irish Hotels Federation on that to make the chef apprenticeships, there will be 4 by this time next year, really part of how that industry is meeting those skills needs. We're also, the council has recently been looking at one of those niche construction areas, which is roofing, and there's going to be a recommendation going now to develop an apprenticeship in roofing to meet the needs. So there's opportunities for flexibility in how we respond. And the sales point that Tony made, there is a sales apprenticeship in development, and part of the feedback that consortium has given is that the apprenticeship is going to be really important, but they'd really like to develop a kind of an add-on in sales right across a range of industries, whether it's tech, finance, so that somebody who's really good and technically and is interested in a sales role could actually add that on and become, have that sales role within their company. And I suppose the reaction of the council was that was a really interesting way of actually responding in a horizontal level, manner to a skills need. So, I suppose our sense is that there's a lot of opportunity and potential here, that we'll be proactively pursuing now over the coming months.
Thank you.
And I suppose just briefly on, I think Kevin mentioned it. So the SLMRU has a big role in, identifying skills needs. The National Skills Bulletin, it should be upcoming in the next couple of weeks, and we'll send it on to the committee. Tony mentioned that it's, the issues are at more kind of occupational level. I think construction is the other big sector where it crosses a number of trades. Engineering is another kind of occupation where you're seeing shortages all over the place. And I suppose just finally, just to touch, a couple of people made the point on the value of apprenticeships and are we actually getting that accurately across. On one side is, ramp up promotion. But I think the other side of things, we see an awful lot of analysis of the kind of the graduate premium, that if you go to university or you go to college and do a degree, you earn X amount over the lifetime. I don't think we've done enough of that in terms of the value of apprenticeship, where there's a significant significant premium there for anyone undertaking that training and then going on to earn money, and that is something that we're actively working on. We're doing an impact evaluation of Kerry Education and Training Board that's going to track what happens to apprenticeships, track what happens to trainees, track what happens to people who've gone through a PLC course, where there is a kind of immediate premium in terms of securing employment, and that's very much on our agenda to reinforce the kind of marketing efforts that we're...
I think that's important. That's what I was trying to get at an earlier stage. There's also another element in relation to that needs to be tracked, and that's the value to society in relation to it, because that's what you're suggesting there is the tracking to the individual, which is very important, and the graduate. But there's also a benefit to society, and compared to investment into a graduate, that the graduate gets the premium, but necessarily for a lower amount of money, pardon the phrase, invested in an apprentice, it's not valued, for the outcome that it gives to society, and we really need to start valuing that, because apprentices and the job, because there's going to be more and more apprenticeships, what they contribute to society has to be really valued in that way as well.
Senator Davitt, to conclude, because I'm conscious.
Brief things. Just in relation to Solace, and I know you hit on it earlier on, Tony, and it was an issue I picked up on. Just to take out of here, you can certainly have it from the guys. I'm involved with the insurance and auctioneering industry, and I know some of the other engineering type industries, some of the guys involved with factories and engineering as well, that the WETs, the subsidies that the WETs trades are getting at present are not applying to them, as we said. I think that's fundamental. There will have to be a change in that. There will have to be an even playing field for all employers. Like, I can't see why one is fish and one is fowl when they are trying to encourage people and skill them and give people in their locality jobs. I think that is something that will have to be urgently addressed. And I think you could take that out of this committee. I have no doubt that has supported a committee so that's something that you could certainly bring back to Solace anyways as my own recommendation, and I'd have no doubt a recommendation from the committee here that we wouldn't like to treat different workers or different apprenticeship skills differently. Secondly, just the guys made, I think Maurice here and Kevin hit on it here in relation to, okay, you were talking about the meat industry. I'm from the Midlands, and a lot of the meat industry is based around the Midlands, or preparation work and killing and packing and all that end of it. And I would be heavily aware that these guys, if I wanted somebody, they had a kid playing football or something, you want to give him a job, you could guarantee him a job in a meat factory in the morning, but unfortunately they wouldn't want to work there. Now, to turn that the other way around, as Kevin said, had you liaised with the LEOs and the social welfare and whatever else, but I would just ask the question, because I'm aware that if somebody was on gaining job seekers allowance and they went a road of being self-employed, that they would lose their entitlements over a number of years. It certainly was the case anyway, unless it was changed very recently. They would lose it over, the different benefits and whatever else, they'd lose it over a couple of years, it would be scaled down over a number of years. I'm just curious, where we are looking at permits in these places, and there were people evidently on the live register in these places, if they were going to get the rate you talked about, €27,000 starting, and maybe they were afraid of losing, a lot of these people, they're afraid of losing their different benefits that are associated. That is one of the biggest factors to stopping people going back into the workplace. Could we try that model? That people that are on the live register, that they would retain a certain amount of their benefits, while, it could be their medical cards, it could be different stuff different housing, different things like that. I'm just curious, there is that in place?
There is support in relation to that.
I'm going to have to move it on. Just to conclude, because we...
And Ms Dunn actually hit it, it's actually retention and career path. It's one thing of going into a job at 22,000 or 29,500 or 27,500, but you have to see where you're going to be in 15. A person that's doing bowling will not physically be able to do that job in their late 30s. It's a young man's game, but it's not treated in a salary way as a young man's game.
Okay, final comment to conclude, because I'm very conscious we have two very patient people waiting there at the back, which is a long time.
So they're serving their apprenticeship.
So brief comments, please, to conclude. Whoever wants to take it.
Okay, I'll take that. I take your point, Senator. I'm not sure. It's certainly something we can explore. but sometimes maybe just to make the point as well, people bringing people in on work permits, they pay €1,000 per work permit. So, you know, if they could get them locally relatively easily, they would tend to do that. And sometimes, depending, they will, if they have to pay more to somebody on a work permit, they may not always pay the same salary to somebody they're employing locally. Like some of these people coming in on work permits are being paid a bit more than the people who are ordinarily, and that can cause problems. But look, that's the way it is, and they're the conditions that we set out.
Skills and stuff that they don't have here, like, you know, that's the reality.
It could be, well. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But look, I'm
just curious of the benefits. Like, say the biggest impediment to a lot of these guys getting off the job seekers at present is the other benefits that they have in relation to it. So maybe it's something they could retain while they're there, and if it works out and they're suited for the job, brilliant. Like, you know, it might be an addition, might be worth looking at anyway.
It's something I'll take back.
Yeah, I appreciate Ms. Dunn, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all very much for coming here today and the presentations. I think it was a very frank and worthwhile meeting, and hopefully you might come back when we launch our report on this. So thank you all very much. We will suspend the meeting now so our other guests can take their seats. Barb Mahagat. I would like to welcome Miss Laura Regan, who has just successfully completed her 4-year electrical apprenticeship with the ESB. Congratulations, Laura. Laura is now a qualified electrician and has secured a full-time job with the ESB. And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Paddy Power from Wexford, who is in the final year of his 3-year insurance apprenticeship, which leads to a level 8 degree. Paddy was part of the very first intake of the insurance apprenticeship programme. I don't have to read out the Defamation Act 2009 because you were present when I read it already. So I'm now going to ask you, I think we'll go with first names if that's okay. Laura, if you'd like to give a brief outline of your career, your apprenticeship, if you don't mind, we'd be delighted to hear it.
Thank you for having me. I decided to start my apprenticeship when I was in school. There was kind of apprenticeships were never kind of spoken about, so I kind of thought that college was the way forward, and I got into a course in engineering and DIT, but I thought that was going to kind of be hands-on. I was always hands-on, and a couple of my friends were doing the electrical apprenticeship with ESB, and when I was talking to them about it, it was kind of you're learning while you're working and you're also getting paid, and I really liked the sound of that, and I applied for it and I got the apprenticeship with ESB and left college. The apprenticeship, so you're in college kind of once a year, and also with ESB we go to a college as well. I found it great, it was the best decision I did.
Okay, do you want to leave Paddy in and then we'll ask you a few questions? Paddy, yeah?
Hi, how are you? Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me. A pleasure to speak in front of you. Myself, I worked in the hospitality industry for about 14 years. I started on a part-time basis when I was 15, and then straight after my leaving cert, I started in the industry full-time. And getting to my late 20s, I started to get a little bit concerned about long-term, career-wise long-term, because I knew that the hospitality industry is kind of like a single man's game. It's a young man's game, you know. I couldn't vision myself 40s, 50s still working in that, you know. So I was kind of starting to panic maybe a little bit, because I knew myself the only experience I had was hospitality experience, and I was late 20s, and I knew that if I was going to have to start from scratch, it was going to have to be from the ground up, you know. So I saw this idea of these apprenticeships, and specifically an insurance apprenticeship. I saw it in the local paper, the People paper in Wexford. It was advertised to an employer there, a brokers called Rights Insurance Brokers, who I'm still with now to this day. And so what they were offering basically was an earn and learn on the job experience, you know, and that kind of really stood out to me, because I kind of thought to myself, look, I can get academic study, I can get on the job training simultaneously, you know, and get such a fantastic qualification in 3 years. I have a few friends who have been in college for 3 or 4 years who have a fantastic qualification leaving college, but then it takes another year or two to adapt on the life, on the job, in the actual, like an office or whatever it is, you know. So look, you have the best of both worlds there with that. I think maybe before I started, I was kind of looking for a few different jobs here and there in the hospitality trade, and there wasn't a whole lot. But now, because of the apprenticeship and the qualifications that I've attained from that, I get job offers every week, from over email, face to face, on LinkedIn, whatever it is, you know, simply because of the skills that I've gotten from an apprenticeship, you know, and the fact that this actual insurance apprenticeship has been promoted so much. And I know it was spoke about earlier that, like, especially the first year we took on 65 apprentices. The following year after that, 2017, was, I think it was 85, and maybe this year it's about 90, 95, you know, so it's constantly, steadily growing, you know. And when I started in 2016 in Wexford, Rights and Zurich Insurance, who were based there as well, were the only two employers taking on insurance apprentices in the county. Now this year there's 5 brokers have taken on apprentices in the county, and where I am, we have 1 apprentice in 3rd year myself, we have a 2nd year and a 1st year, so it's a constant pipeline of skills coming through. You know, so look, when I finish in August, September, there'll be another apprentice taken on, so it's just constantly going to be a nice stream of it, you know. And look, I can't speak highly enough of the programme, how I've been treated, how my employer treats me. It's especially good in terms of the skills I've picked up, because I haven't just been put in one department. In the brokerage where I am, I've worked in different departments. I've got to see different aspects of the industry from different areas. There's no question it's stupid, no question it's silly. My employer's been fantastic, Solus have been fantastic, the Insurance Institute and IT Sligo, like.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you, Laura. I might kick off myself. Firstly, I just want to congratulate both of you. You, Laura, I think you're breaking the mould, really. Like a young girl to be a qualified electrician working for the ESB. You know, we hear there's only 2% of women and girls doing apprenticeships, so it's fantastic and well done. And I just want to say to you, Paddy, after, as you said, you were 14 years in hospitality, and to decide to turn around and retrain yourself and, you know, and look to your future, congratulations. You know, I have to say that's fantastic. Laura, if I could just ask you a couple of questions, and this is not an interrogation or anything, it's just to ask you some questions. So when you were training to be, you know, when you were an apprentice electrician, and I suppose you were based with the ESB, were you?
I was, yeah.
Were you the only female in the class, or in the intake of apprenticeships? Maybe you talk a little bit about that.
There was 3 of us taken on out of 75, so there was 72 boys and 3 girls.
Okay, and did you find that strange?
No, I didn't really, but I can see how some people may find it strange. Personally, I didn't, because I was kind of used to being with boys and stuff. The subjects and stuff I done in school, I was always the only girl, because I like to do like construction and engineering and stuff. I always kind of thought that that's what I wanted to do, so it didn't bother me. And at the moment, ESB actually go around to schools and to school fairs and stuff, trying to promote females in the apprenticeship, and I go along and try and talk to them, because sometimes it's easier to see someone who's actually doing it face to face, so that it's not just kind of someone telling you. You can actually see it, and they can ask me questions and stuff, and sometimes girls don't even think that they can do it. And then, like,
so were you in a mixed school for secondary school? Were you in a community college, like a vocational educational school? Yeah.
I started off in an all-girls school, a private school, and I only lasted there until I think it was Christmas in first year. There was no practical subjects at all, and the only practical subject I did was home economics, and I was like, this isn't for me. And as soon as I went to the community college, then like I was so much happier, because I was able to do these things. And a lot of the time, like when I'm talking to girls that I was at the RDS and stuff with the higher options, a lot of the girls are saying that the subjects aren't available to them, so they're not sure the skills and stuff that they need to go on to do the apprenticeships. So if I hadn't changed skills, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Okay, so you found that being in a mixed school helped you when you were going for the apprenticeship, because you didn't feel too daunted by being only 3 of 75.
Yeah. But then when I went out to the yards, I was the only girl. So there was hundreds of men, and then I was the only girl.
And did you find that difficult?
No, because everyone was so nice. Like, if anything, they treat you even nicer, because they're aware of the fact you're the only girl, and they kind of mind you and stuff.
Yeah.
But no, not at all. I was really lucky with the people I worked with, and ESB were so supportive of that. Like, I never kind of felt intimidated at all.
And can I ask you another question? Did you go straight into the apprenticeship out of school, or did you do anything in between?
I did college for a year.
You did college for a year, and it wasn't for you.
Sorry?
Oh, you did
engineering for a year.
Engineering, perfect. Yeah. Okay. Who'd like to come in, Kevin?
Probably more. First of all, congratulations to both of you, and sorry for delaying you. I think it was probably a lot of my questions that delayed you, kept you here late. But Paddy, one of the things, the hospitality sector is obviously a grueling physically kind of thing, is it? And it's, you know, a lot of people don't stay in and out after, you know, after the mid-30s, especially unsociable hours and things like that. I'm just wondering in relation to, did you find there was particular financial barriers to go back and to retrain? And also, was there kind of a large drop of earnings over that period?
Well, to answer your questions, yeah, absolutely. Hospitality industry, it's a young man's game, absolutely. And I was kind of at the stage where I was not physically burnt out, but I was mentally burnt out. So, and I was working on sociable hours. I was missing out on things with family. I used to get my roster on a Sunday night for the following week. I didn't know if I was working Monday or what I was working. Do you know what I mean? So I need something with a little bit of clarity. And with some consistency, and I need to get my life back in a way, you know. And yeah, of course I did. I took a wage drop for the first year, but I simply just took that wage drop because I knew that the wages were going to have a little bit of an increase in year 2, and then in year 3, and then a nice big increase after the end of year 3, you know. So look, I kind of looked at it. Yes, it's going to be a struggle for a year or 2, but at the end of the day, it was 3 years of hard work to really turn your life around, do you know?
Yeah, and if you don't mind me asking, is at what age did you leave school at?
16.
16. Just to be kind of clear, why I'm asking you that is, like, I actually believe that, you know, there should be a kind of an educational voucher for somebody that goes through life. So an early school leaver can cash in that voucher at a later stage and say, well, right, I didn't cost the state, Joe, and get an apprenticeship, or I didn't go to college. But at some stage, I can cash in that educational voucher to possibly increase my wage and capacity. So there's that kind of a voucher system there that you could kind of cash in at for 4,000 or 5,000. Would that be a huge benefit to people?
I mean, people like yourself, I'm an early school leaver, I left at 16 as well, and it's kind of a barrier to get back to education because you have to take quite a large financial hit at some stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I was quite high up where I was working. I was a bar manager, you know, and I was duty supervisors in different places, so I was quite highly skilled in the industry, you know. But I did take a financial hit to start, but then again, apprenticeships are kind of like associated with, like, it's low money starting out.
Yeah.
Do you know, and until you gain the skills and gain the experience, then you start moving up, start moving forward, and financially things get better. You know, but at the end of the day, that was my decision to take that hit, to make a life decision and to make a career decision. You know.
Well, yeah, it gets conversation piece. Like I would say, like in the building sector, the construction industry, hospitality sector, and several sectors, you can earn reasonably good money up to a period, but like when a family comes along, or etc., you're physically not able, you then find yourself that you can't go forward because you can't afford education, and you find yourself then unemployed and kind of kept out of the ability to earn a reasonable income because of your lack of early opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The starting out wage for me was tough. Absolutely, it was 20,000. You know, straight up, I took maybe a 15,000, 16,000 decrease per annum in wages for that. But then again, as I said, that was my decision to do that. I was prepared to do that. I was prepared to put my head down and work hard for 3 years to get back to where I was financially in a different career. You know, and as I said, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, something with clarity for me was big. You know, and something that I can progress career-wise, financially-wise, and room to improve is what it's all about. You know, and as I said, in hospitality, I kind of felt I went as far as I needed to, went as far as I could, and went as far as I wanted to.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, and again, obviously, to commend you for coming in today, and it's not an interrogation or anything like that. It's just for us to understand, I suppose, what it's like at the cold face of it. I understand there. I worked in the hospitality sector for 10 years, so I empathise with what you're saying about being mentally burnt out. It's very difficult after a period of time. Just to ask, I suppose both of you could give, if you were to educate me on the process that you went through, if somebody like yourselves was finding it difficult or was thinking about going for an apprenticeship, you've kind of highlighted a lot of all the positives that you've got there. Are there any challenges you found in relation to it, or was there anything you found challenging that you kind of went, even pre you started, like before you started, or any kind of psychological barriers you perceived to go, oh, am I going to do this? Am I not? Should I be doing it? Should I not? You know what I mean? Anything that you felt uncomfortable about? Because it's often maybe those softer things that we can't pinpoint in paper are the things that can often block people or stop people from taking the plunge. So, like, again, if you can't, it's fine, but it's just if you can, it'd be great.
I can only speak as a career changer, not as a school leaver or a college graduate. You know, on the apprenticeship that I'm doing, there's school leavers, there's college graduates, and there's career changers. Now, there's very few career changers, maybe 3 or 4, myself included. For me, after working in an industry that I knew so well for such a long time, to then start something new, yeah, it was nerve-wracking. It was going to be a challenge. I knew it was going to be a challenge, you know, and it was scary, absolutely. You know, I've dropped everything that I knew. I've dropped this fantastic job. It's a fantastic paid job to just dive into something completely new that I know nothing about, you know, just simply to start out another career, just something fresh, or something new, something with a bit of clarity, you know. So look, those mental barriers were there in terms of, like, am I going to be able for this change? Is this really going to be for me? You know, but that's going to come, I suppose, no matter what. But as I'm saying that as a career changer, you know. Okay. So I can't speak as a school leaver.
Yeah.
The only negative I kind of had was before I started to make the decision whether I was going to take the apprenticeship or not, was there was family and stuff going, are you going to leave a course, like leave college for a degree to go and do this apprenticeship? Like, are you sure this is what you're going to do? And that kind of thing. And a lot of parents kind of have those worries and stuff at the fairs, like an apprenticeship, like what benefits is it going to be to you and stuff. like you said it as well earlier on, that all the people I started college with all graduated this year as well, and a lot of them didn't have jobs to go into, or they were going back to starting on a really low wage because they had no experience, or they have to work for free to get the experience before they can do that. Whereas I've learned while I was working, and I continue to work the same as I did in my apprenticeship, but now I'm qualified. So I got paid throughout the whole thing, and now I'm starting on a really good salary as well, being qualified. So I think that maybe people don't know enough about apprenticeships and about the benefits of apprenticeships, and maybe if that could kind of be, yeah, especially with like the parents and guidance counsellors and stuff like that. I just don't think it's spoken about enough.
No. Okay.
No.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Just to congratulate Paddy and Laura for their work so far, and to come before us today. It's really delighted to see you here. It won't do you any harm in your CVs to say you presented to an Oireachtas committee either. So, one question I might ask you is the present apprenticeship scheme. If you could change anything in it, what do you think needs to be changed, or do you feel there's anything that needs to be changed? Or I know it's not meant to be a difficult question or not.
I can only speak specifically from the insurance apprenticeship, but I can't speak highly enough of it. I can't speak highly enough of terms of how I'm treated by Lawless, IT Sligo, the Insurance Institute, and especially my employer. Your employer really has to engage with you, and has to engage with Lawless and the Insurance Institute. I'm so well looked after. I'm given so many different days to study. If I need extra time to study, whatever support I need, it's only one question away, and I get it every single time. What I don't know about anybody else in different brokerages, right? But I've worked in 3 or 4 different departments in the brokerage so far in 2.5 years, so I have different department experience in one industry in such a short amount of time, you know. So you really get to see the industry from a broad horizon. And look, I can't speak highly enough. I honestly can't. I don't mean to come in front of you and like tell you how good it is or whatever, but that's personally my experience. I can't speak highly enough.
Could I just follow up there? So could you just explain, did you give maybe 3 days a week with the insurance company and 2 days in college, or?
No, it's 4 days with the insurance company.
And 1 day?
1 day in college, yeah. 1 day. Well, it's 1 day at college at my desk, and I do some online lectures through IT Sligo. So look, we've done this, a vast amount of different modules and subjects over the last 2.5 years. We've done big data, advanced Excel, marketing, e-business, technical communications, technical mathematical communications. I've done 6 or 7 different insurance exams now. I'm APA qualified in insurance, which is accredited product advisor. I'm now CIP as of September, which is certified insurance practitioner, and then I've got 9 months left to a Bachelor of Arts degree in insurance practice. And so I look at the end of the 3 years, I'm going to have a signature BA in CIB.
Fantastic. And Laura, can you explain how was yours? Did you have to go to college for some of it?
Yeah, in first year we go to college for 6 months, so you'd be working full time Monday to Friday, and then for 6 months you get your block release where you go to college, and then in second and third year you go for 3 months apiece as well.
Okay.
So it's slightly different. Okay. We're let go in blocks rather than.
Okay, Padraig?
Yeah, I'm from Buncralla in County Donegal, and the reason why I say that to you is that I left school when I wasn't even 15 years old, and I was actually the norm in my secondary school back then. Whenever I returned from first year to second year, half of the girls in my class had not come back for second year. They took up work in the local factory, which was Fru the Loom, it was a textile manufacturing. So culturally, that was just what you did. You left school, you went out, and you put money. And I'm 45 years old. I'm not, not talking here about the Hovis bread ads and I'm talking about the 1980s, And the reason why I say that, I'm really taken, Paddy, by what your testimony was that so many of the people in my generation are, they've gone into, they went into the factory, they went into construction, and
probably feel stuck.
Yeah, you end up, just doing the churn. And what I'm really interested in is just, I think my sense of this is that there's a real lack of awareness, particularly those who left school, went into the trades, maybe you know, this famous thing about not being academic, the whole system wasn't suited to them, not being academically intelligent, but maybe vocationally, you know, on-the-job intelligent. And I feel very strongly our society doesn't value those skills as much as academic skills. I think our system's skewed in that respect. So I'm really interested in terms of, from both of you, about just how we can promote, you know, we can target sections of the economy and promote, you know, career changing, and maybe people gone on a path that, you know, that they would have taken in another, if other opportunities that had come along. I'm visualising so many people from my community who would have liked to have had a career change and maybe to find job satisfaction. And you know, I'm very taken by your testimony, I have to say, Paddy, and really, you know, in terms of my own life experience, I really commend you, not in a patronising way, and you know, in the sacrifice you made financially, which isn't easy for a number of years, but now you've found yourself in a path that in the long term will give you true job satisfaction and happiness, you know. And I think it's powerful testimony to share with other people out there who might go down the same road, you know.
Well, in my own experience, you're talking about promotion and how we can promote apprenticeships in the future. I've done a lot of work with the Insurance Institute and Solus over the last couple of years promoting this apprenticeship, whether it be through the Insider magazine, or I've done a couple of different newspaper advertisements. I was on Ireland AM last year to promote the apprenticeship as well. So there's been a big push and a big surge on the insurance apprenticeship in this country, and a lot of people have got in contact with me over the last year or two. Are you Paddy Power? I saw you on this, I saw you on that, I saw you on YouTube. How to get into this, how to get involved. Any of the apprentices who have applied where I work now at the minute have seen different promotional tools that I have done recently and have wanted to be a career changer. They want to, well, look, I work in hospitality, if you can do it, I can do it, you know, sort of way. So I think we had maybe over 100 applicants, 150 applicants for the job this year, same the year previous and same the year that I started, you know. But a lot of people kind of like get in contact with you and say, look, I've seen this, you've made a career change, I want to make a career change, something different, I want to start over, I want to start in a new career where I can like gain more experience and improve myself financially and academically, you know. So I think it would, the insurance apprenticeship that I'm doing and the promotion that's put into it is fantastic, and I don't see how it can be improved more. Maybe if you were to speak to more apprentices about their experience and get them out there, get them more like an advertising campaign or something like that, because there's no better way of getting feedback from someone who's been through the mill, do you know?
Aidan?
Yeah, just briefly, we're heading for vote there. Just congratulations, very well presented. Talk very well, and you're the only two people here today that are working waffling all day, myself included, so well
done. Well, do you know what? Can I just say one thing? I think, Laura, you struck me when you said, and I think it could be your tagline, learning while working and getting paid. I just think it's brilliant, you know, and what you said, Paddy, a career changer. Like, you must find, do you find you have a much better work-life balance now, a better quality of life, the fact that you probably have a weekend now that you never had?
Well, sure, it'll be Saturday night now, unfortunately. No, but it's nice to have that clarity. It's nice to have, like, it's nice to plan things with family, you know, because previously people say, you come in here on Friday, can't, I'm working, can't on Saturday, can't on Sunday, you know, and I didn't have any sort of set routine what way I was working, and now it's just nice to have a kind of a life back and know at the same time that I'm improving myself academically and financially as well. So look, I said it from day one, I said it last year, I'll say it again, it's the best decision I ever made.
Oh, this is great to hear. Yeah?
I think Laura made a very specific point from our own experience in relation to the type of school that people are attending at such a young age and the influence that that has on their development at 12 and 13 in relation to the skills, because if the specific vocational subjects are not in the school and they're interested, they're caught, and you're pushing them down an academic line that maybe when they're 28 or 29 they're coming back in to find their niche again. But it might be something we need to flag at an earlier, or something we need to discuss with the Education Committee.
Like, everyone should be given the same opportunities, because you were saying that a lot of the girls are saying a lot of them had to choose between the likes of, say, home economics and woodwork, and it was all the girl. Then when it was split down the middle, all the girls were going to home ec and all the boys were shoved to woodwork, and sometimes the boys want to do the home economics and vice versa. It wasn't available to them.
Yeah, well, no, you're completely right what you're saying, because I attended St Declan's Community College in Waterford, which is a VEC, and my 13-year-old daughter started there a couple of months ago, and her favourite subject is tech graphics.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely blown away that, because she's an academic child, she'll kill me now if she hears me, but she just found that tech graphics, and if she hadn't gone to that school, we would have never have got the opportunity. You know, so I just think when you have a broad range of subjects in schools, you know, academic is not for everyone, and
Absolutely.
I just think if you can guide a child at a young age and let them know that you don't always have to go to university, you don't always have to go to an institute of technology, that you can take on an apprenticeship, and you can, as you said, I just think it's brilliant, learning while working and getting paid. It's a great byline. So I just want to thank you for coming. I know you had a long wait, but you know, it's our job to, the other guests that were here, we have to put them through the ringer, and we have to get as many answers out of them as possible. But we will be making recommendations, and we will be launching our document, our proposals, and hopefully if you're available on the day, you might come back and launch it with us. We'd be delighted to have you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything further? Okay, with my note. I would like to thank you all for coming here today to engage with the committee. That concludes all of our business on today's agenda. The joint committee is now adjourned. Sine die.